used to manage my team with spreadsheets. It was a nightmare. And then we switched to Monday.com.
What is your biggest secret? I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm only going through the motions so I don't disappoint my parents and girlfriend. When I was 15, I snuck out in my mom's van to see a girl for sexy times and sideswiped another car while driving. Hightailed it out of there and went home and parked the van, backing it into the space. Got a hammer and walked up the road about a mile. Smashed a car's tail light to get broken glass. And took it back and strategically tossed it near the new crime scene. Mom woke up, saw the damage and called the police. Hit and run was their verdict. Probably the crazy neighbors across the street, they said. My mom kept a lookout for a wrecked car coming to visit them for almost a year. People think I'm a happy guy. I actually hate everything about myself. Ugh. This is me right now. People say that I am a funny guy who always has a smile on his face. I am very self-conscious. It takes me a long time of being friends with somebody before I am sure they aren't friendly to my face and trashing me behind my back. I'm making jokes because maybe when they're laughing at something I said they aren't thinking negatively of me. My mom paid $68,000 college education in hopes that I'd find a good job after college. I graduated in December and have lied to her ever since, saying I've been looking and interviewing for jobs. Instead, I made a website and have been spending my time drawing customized big dig out for people. Edit, for the sake of my inbox. The site is itidica.com. Thank you all for your support in my wet dreams. If I wasn't so worried about hurting someone else, I'd drive into oncoming traffic tonight. Please don't. I don't know you, but it would still be a loss to the world. That's the blessing and the curse of it all. I want to so badly, but I know I'd never work up the nerve to do it. I work hard and have been promoted twice. People think I am a good worker and love my job. But the truth is I would quit in a heartbeat if I had enough money to survive. I hate my job and I hate working in general. I work hard out of paranoia and constant fear of losing my job. My goal in life is not to work my life away and I am failing. I'm a raging alcoholic. I've given up all other drugs, but I can't seem to give up booze. I'm drunk right now and it's not even 3 PM on a Tuesday. I've been really good at hiding it, but I think my fiancée is starting to get suspicious. Dude, go to AA. I know it's scary, but if your fiancée is important to you, do it for her. I really need to. But I'm a little scared to go to the first one. I have some massive social anxiety and I don't really know how to talk to people. Plus I don't really know what meeting is the one to go to. The website for my city district is kind of confusing. I don't want my lushas to show up at like a women's only meeting or something. Both my girlfriend and I are gay. We're about to open our relationship up because after 4 years of dating and joking about my homosexuality and her lesbianism, we're only now becoming honest enough with ourselves to talk about it. I'm terrified of losing her because I've never loved anyone like I love her. But neither of us are happy with our sex life. When I was 16 I got into a relationship with a 39-year-old who thought I was 18. He was heavily depressed so he wasn't working. He was just sort of surviving. And we'd spend nights together. At the time I didn't think it'd affect me in any negative way, but it did. It was ducked up. He told me if he ever healed himself it wasn't my fault. He was just too sad. We had great discussions though. We talk about life and big questions. He was more of a dad to me. With 6. After a year I just blocked him on everything and never heard of him again. I'm not sure how I feel about it now. I lost my virginity to him. But I can't tell that to people. No one will ever know. My family thinks I got a second internship when I actually quit it on the second day. I have been going to a fake internship for several months now. Where are you actually going during this time? Going places. Hiking. Shopping. Eating. Meeting friends. I always eat the orange peel and throw away the rest of the orange. Sounds like you need to go to how to eat an orange class. Throwaway account here. Well, to start this off, I'm a guy. My sister was getting married and I was one of the groomsmen. I went to the bachelor party with my soon-to-be brother-in-law and got so drunk that I ended up crashing at his place. He and I were pretty good friends and he knew I was gay and was always playfully teasing and borderline flirting. I didn't really think much of it because some guys, regardless of sexuality, do that for attention. Anyways, I was laying on the couch watching TV trying to fall asleep and he comes in and sits on the other end of the couch and puts my feet in his lap. We were talking and he just starts rubbing my leg. Well, long story short, I slept with my brother-in-law the day before he married my sister. I've regretted it every single day since then, but it's just one of those secrets I'm gonna have to take with me to the grave. People will call me crazy or insane since I'm only 21 and look like I should be going out a lot more. I just feel too old to go to raves, concerts, dating, etc. I just want to sit back and enjoy the silence instead of going out. I am the same. I'm 22/female outgoing but don't enjoy what people our age are enjoying. I enjoy the quiet things in life. Whether that be a deep conversation with a stranger at the airport, hiding with a book in Barnes & Noble, standing in the ocean water and wondering if I'm truly happy with where I'm at. I'm in love with a married woman. My best friend, female, and I, male, believe strongly that but for a single choice in high school, and a bunch of other choices in college, we would be happily married. But those choices went against us. And now we're just best friends married to other people. When we're together it is just like someone shook up a champagne bottle and is slowly easing the cork out. It's hard. Throw away. But I cheated in all of my college finals. I figured out if you are careful and confident enough you can have a smartphone on your lap. Once the screen has the brightness on low it is pretty easy to look through without being noticed. I had exam invigilator walk by me all the time and not notice. Had a smartphone and would load it up with pre-answered questions and all the lecture notes. I got a 4.0 GPA. I've a technical degree and have been hired into the highest department of the biggest company in my area of study. I don't even regret it. I studied enough to understand the coursework but I always sucked at remembering lots of information. It landed me my dream job and I've really excelled in the role. I'm about to be evicted and I haven't told my family because they all are struggling themselves. Oh god. I was in foreclosure. And the sheriff's sale for my house was 2 days away. I saved up some of my meds and was planning on telling my mom and asking her to take care of my cats. I just couldn't tell her till it was almost too late. We didn't have the money to stop it. Our family business was in the toilet. My mom was in debt. I wasn't able to get any help on the foreclosure. I was so ready to be done because I couldn't handle the shame of it. But once I told my mom, she wouldn't let me do it. She helped me through. I filed bankruptcy. Lost the house anyways but coming clean just lifted so much off my chest. I was living under this cloud of losing my house and not letting anyone know. I'm moving in with my friends who could really use the help with their rent and it's okay. It's not great. Losing your house is never great. But it's okay. You'll be okay. Tell someone. I have a good life. I served in Iraq so I have the veteran thing going for me. I recently transferred to a new school with a 3.82 GPA and I'm receiving an ample scholarship. I make very good money and soon will be starting my first business at 26 years old. My secret? I'm a junkie. Edit. Thanks for all the support and replies guys. You know, for all the shit that gets we can actually be a very empathetic and kind bunch sometimes. Plotted a murder for many years. Everything was perfect. Had thought it out and accounted for many situations. Estimated the number of people I'd have to kill who would get in my way. etc. Of course. Killing myself afterwards. Thank God for magic mushrooms. That other me is dead forever. In the words of Andrew Kehoe, criminals are made, not born. Some of my friends know how I truly am, but most people in my life think I'm a cutesy innocent sweet girly girl. And maybe I am. But what I keep pretty hidden is my sexual practices. Especially the BDSM kind. According to a few strangers, I look like a super religious naive girl. But really I'm an atheist who regularly gets tied up and rims my BF. Gets ducked in the ass. And deep throats a big dig so deep and hard that my throat gets sore. So here's my secret. I am married with 2 children. My husband is away for work often. Right after I had our second child, my husband left for 2 weeks. I hadn't had any alcohol since finding out I was pregnant with our second child. After putting my children down, my oldest in his bed and the baby in his coliper, it was a small crib that lays on the bed with the parents, I decided why not have a drink of wine. Well, I had 2 glasses and was feeling tipsy but not drunk. So I went to bed around 12 AM. Around 2 I woke up and went to the bathroom. When I came back I noticed my bed was empty. No crib, no baby. I panicked. I went to the end of the bed and my baby was on the floor. Underneath the overturned crib. I flipped the crib over and he was grey. I immediately began CPR and called 911. But all the while I'm thinking, how did this happen? Then I realized while I had been sleeping I must have somehow pushed him off. As the police and ambulance arrived he started to stir. We were driven to the nearest children's hospital. They asked me what happened and I lied. I said I woke up and he wasn't breathing. They didn't buy it at first, but after finding he was having seizures and his raisin test came back negative for broken bones and signs of abuse, they diagnosed him with apnea. He's now a 10-month healthy boy, but no one, not even my husband, knows what really happened. Everyone thinks I saved his life because I did CPR. I will never tell anyone I roll. I don't drink anymore ever and I fear I will one day receive my due karma. And the guilt eats at me every day. I'm actually gay. But a lot of people assume that I'm straight, just based on how I act and my appearance. My mom still denies the fact that I am, and I've had a lot of resentment towards her for not wanting me to be who I am. My parents think I'm Christian. But I stopped believing a few years ago. They wouldn't hate me if they knew. But would just be sad and felt they failed in what they believe. I love my parents too much to do that to them. EE savings bonds. I have bunches of EE savings bonds in my bank safe deposit box that were given to me from the time I was born by both sets of grandparents, aunts and uncles, for every special occasion in my life: birthdays, Christmas, Easter, graduations, etc. They've been in there for years, collecting interest, tax deferred. The face value on each is $100, but I have no idea what they're really worth now. With compounded interest over time. It's like a fun secret from the past that they gave me. And I just let them sleep in the bank vault. Untouched. I love my wife with everything in me, but I'm beginning to resent her. We have 3 children and she is a stay-at-home mother who refuses to work. This leaves all the bills and financial struggles on me. She has no idea how tight our budget is due to her lack of understanding of the value of a dollar. I have talked to her about it. My mom handed her a job which she lost due to attendance because she doesn't want to work. Seriously consider putting a gum in my mouth, but the only thing stopping me is my children. The things me and my girlfriend do in the bedroom. Sounding and pegging. Definitely wouldn't want my friends and family knowing. Alright. I'll bite. He has her stick a smooth metal rod up his urethra. Have to be careful not to burst any of the fragile piping either or rupture anything, as I don't imagine pissing out pure blood is particularly pleasant. That absolutely nothing gives me joy in this world anymore. I am in a crippling depression whirlpool that I have no motivation to swim out of. I simply act normal around people so I do not have to talk about it. And the only concept that has kept me on this earth a quarter century is pure curiosity of if it will ever change. I take plenty of Drugas to numb myself. Although nothing like meth or H, because somehow even I have that much respect for myself. I come from an absolutely chaotic childhood and nothing can really make me get excited anymore. I'm a good-looking guy and have had beautiful women come and go, and their love was the closest thing to anything warm my entire life. Everyone loves me and apparently everyone likes me for me. But if I were to ever say any of this to anyone, it would completely blow their mind. I also have Tourette's. So yay. My family are parasites. Simply dreadful people. They are emotionally and physically abusive to me exclusively. They stole my money and spent it on luxuries for themselves. I was blamed and victimized for any tiny thing. So when my grandmother died, who was the one good person among them, she left me an enormous amount of money that none of them knew and know about. I have no idea how much there is in total. I'm getting yearly installments of £25,000 until I turn 25. And then I get all that remains in a single lump. God only knows how much there is in total. But I've gotten £125,000 so far. I'm 21, and there is no ducking way those awful people are ever hearing about it. I'm 24, have Parkinson's, and the only people that know are my mother, doctor, and therapist. None of my friends or family know. And it's getting worse every year. I think I was sexually abused when I was 8. I remember I was at my aunt's house, and my cousin and his friend came home from the bar. His friend got into bed with me. I remember my aunt walked in and there was a lot of screaming. She always made me sleep in her room when I stayed over after that. She died when I was 13. So I will never know what really happened.
Welcome to r/Entitled Kids, where a spoiled brat gets kicked in the face. As you probably guessed from the title, I work at a Build-A-Bear. What is Build-A-Bear, you might ask? It's the coolest store to even exist, in my opinion. Kids pick out an unstuffed fuzzy friend, fill it up with stuffing, dress it up, give it a name, and can even add extra stuff like scents. I love working there. I've had this job for about 5 months, and while I really only work on the weekends and during holidays, I love it. But, of course, it's a magnet for spoiled kids. Now, believe it or not, I can take care. Most of the parents at Build-A-Bear are extremely polite and don't let their kids go anywhere. I'm thankful for that, but of course, that doesn't mean things always go smooth. The first instance of an entitled kid was maybe in my second week. This mother comes in with a little boy we'll call Gaston. Now, at first, Gaston seems sweet. He also has a little baby brother, and it's baby brother's birthday. Now, what's also cool about Build-A-Bear is that we have a birthday bear. If you're part of our rewards program, you can buy the birthday bear, but only pay the age of the child. Like, if the kid is 2 years old, the bear is $2. Cool, right? Well, this mom wanted to build a birthday bear for baby brother, and she asked for Gaston's help. However, mom is making it clear that this is not Gaston's bear. She tells him at least 4 times that this bear will be for baby brother. Gaston says he understands, so I do my thing. I'm usually on the stuffer, so not only do I stuff the bears, I also perform the heart ceremony. Each fuzzy friend gets a heart, so we do a little ceremony so the heart can bring the friend to life. I picked out a special birthday heart for the bears since it was for baby brother's birthday. Everything is fine and dandy. I sew the bear up and they head to checkout. Then, once at checkout, Gaston unleashes the loudest scream I've ever heard in my life. I literally jumped when I heard it. I was worried something had happened, like he cut himself or something. I turn around to see Gaston writhing about as his mom is struggling to get him to stand. He refuses to stand up, and he's red in the face, tears streaming down his face. The father, who's been sitting outside on the bench, finally comes in and takes the bear along with the little brother. When the dad takes the bear, Gaston gets even angrier. He starts grabbing things that are hanging on shelves, throwing them, and he continues to release this unholy screech from his lungs. He's trying to throw himself into stuff too, but mom has a hold on him so he can't get free. So why did Gaston start throwing a fit? Because despite being told that the bear he was making wasn't for him. He still thought he would get to keep it. Keep in mind, his mother told him repeatedly that the bear was not for him, and Gaston said he understood. I guess he really didn't. Mom manages to get Gaston out of the store, but he's not done. He's trying his hardest to get back into the store. You've seen how kids will pull on their parents' arm to get them to go a certain way. Gaston was doing that. His face is beat red. I was surprised he didn't pass out from the wailing. He tried so hard to get back into the store, and when that doesn't work, he tries to grab the bear from his baby brother. He snatches it, causing the baby to cry. Then he tries to make a run for it. Mom and Dad aren't having it. Dad plucks the bear away from Gaston and returns it from the baby, who then stops crying. Gaston is still full of rage, but his mom has picked him up and is giving him a talking to. He's still throwing, but Mom refuses to put him down and walks away. That was the first full-blown tantrum I'd seen at Build-A-Bear. I've seen a few more, but so far, I think that's the biggest eruption I've seen. Then OP clarifies in the comments that a lot of people assume Gaston was like 4 years old or something. Nope, he was at least 7. No one howls like Gaston, no one scowls like Gaston, throws a tantrum so incredibly foul like Gaston. Our next Reddit post is from Kalane04. This happened around 30 years ago, and strangely seems to be one of my mother's favorite stories to tell about me. Let me paint the scene. It's a sunny day in the late 80s on a busy London bus street. I was around 3 years old, waiting with my mom at the bus stop. There were a few people in front of us, and a sweet little old lady waiting behind us. Knowing my gregarious mother, she probably had been chatting to her beforehand. Suddenly, we hear the old lady cry out in pain. Another woman with a little boy is waiting behind her, and this 6-year-old has started kicking the old lady in the leg while giggling. The old lady says, "Excuse me, that hurts. Could you stop?" The entitled mother says, "Don't tell my kid what to do. He's only playing." My mom says, "Here, sweetheart, come in front of me. If he kicks me, I'll kick his mother." The old lady steps in front of us, and my mom picked me up because I was tired. I'm positioned so that my legs are wrapped around my mom's waist, and my head is resting on her shoulder, where I have a clear view of the boy behind her. After a moment, I see him eyeing up the back of my mom's legs. He then creeps up closer and prepares himself to start kicking, and this makes me angry. Noting that my feet are level with his face, I wind my leg back and booted him full in the face as hard as I could with my sandaled foot. His head snaps back and he falls back onto his mom, his nose gushing blood, and he starts screaming his head off. The entitled mom screamed at my mom, "Your brat just kicked my baby in the face." My mom answered in a sickly sweet manner, "Don't scream at my kid. She was only playing." We then got on the bus, and I got some penny sweets later as a reward. OP, I don't understand why you're confused that this is your mom's favorite story to tell about you, because if my kid did this, I'd tell this story to anyone who would listen. Our next Reddit post is in 1996. This was back in high school, and I was a second-year student. We had an art class that had computers in the back for art projects and lessons, such as looking up references for our assignments. One student was a senior, the class wasn't restricted to sophomores, and he was always trying to go in the back for the computers. The teacher also allowed computers to be used for other assignments if we needed, as long as our art assignments were completed. I would often spend time completing artwork early so I could go complete my essays and other subjects on the computer. The teacher was really kind and liked my work, so she usually permitted me to use the computers as long as I wasn't doing rated M stuff. There were 3 computers, 2 really old and 1 new. The computer had a monitor and a separate machine, which you turn on for the screen. This one student would always want to use it, and it was first come, first serve. He'd usually try to get on there first, but the teacher had him sit at the normal tables. He was decent at drawing, but I'd usually finish first and get to the computers. Whenever I did, he'd get pissed that I took his computer, and he'd try cussing me out, quietly since his teacher was big on class conduct. I reminded him that I had some pretty hard classes that involved essays and research, while he usually just looked up pictures of anime girls or JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. It wasn't exactly inappropriate and it was a form of art, but it was distracting and he was using it for free time purposes rather than class purposes. Get off my computer! The teacher literally said it was first come, first serve. It's not yours. You think that's a thing? I always come here, so that makes it mine. Not fast enough, apparently. Use the other computers. This is the only one that can work properly. Plus, you can search up anime on those just fine. I never understood why this particular one was so important. F you, bundle of sticks. I'm bi, so you're half right. This would repeat every once in a while as he would try shoving me away and giving up before doing it again most of the time. He's not very good at verbal jabs, so I was fine. The teacher would often see the arguments and give us both a warning, but most of the times we actually fought was when the teacher was helping other students. Around the second semester, that student was getting pretty aggressive. Whenever I looked away to get a pencil or to look at my notes, he'd push me aside and go Control A and delete. He doesn't know Google Drive does autosaves, thank God. Other times, he'd whack me with his backpack and tell me to go die, but that wasn't too often. There was a project involving stop motion animations with clay and anything the participants wanted to bring. No guns or adult toys. So I brought Legos to make a stop motion of Lego pieces flying together and making anything before falling apart and building something new. This whole time, that student was at the computers and wasn't doing the project. The teacher told him if he didn't work, he'd fail the project. I was fine with it as I didn't need a computer for building stuff. What he did next, I was effing pissed. When I was almost done with the project, he shoved me out of my seat and grabbed the iPad I was using. The school lent the class a whole cart of them for the project and deleted not only my progress, but the progress of the other 4 classes that had used that particular iPad. Then he tossed it on my Legos and kicked me in the side. Half of the class was shocked, seeing as that was literally out of left field and I didn't even do anything personally to him other than use a computer that didn't belong to him. The teacher was pissed and started to berate him for injuring a student and damaging property. I don't know if she was talking about the iPad or my Legos, neither of which were damaged while I was recovering. I wasn't hurt too bad, so I told the teacher I was fine, while telling her all my work as well as several other works on the iPad were deleted because of him. He was sent to the office, got a 0 on the project, heard he got a month's detention and was unable to attend prom and senior night. And the teacher offered extra time to complete the project. I only needed a few extra days, seeing as building Legos was second nature to me. I got a B, which I'm not complaining about, and the student was banned from computers for the remaining 4 months. Guess he was whining about me using his computer. He didn't go near them, but he'd shoot nasty glares at me from the front of the class. Man, I can't believe this guy is a senior. His behavior sounds closer to something like an 8-year-old. Hashtag ruined Christmas. My mom got me the wrong colored iPhone XR. Stupid cow. I feel sorry for your mom having such an ungrateful child. She spent a few $100 on you and this is how you react? Our next Reddit post is from Andrew YTTRA. Backstory, I'm in a social group that drops off their kids to do fun activities and socialize with other kids. The day of the incident was when we went to a water park with a wave pool. When it happened, it was me, my friend, the group leader who was an adult, and the entitled kid. We just got out of the changing room, so we went to the wave pool where everyone was. The waves weren't on at the time, so we could just go to the deep end. I could go there anytime because I'm a good swimmer. Me and my friend went in to find some pool rings. I ended up going to the deep end and actually found one. That's when the waves started. I saw a friend close to the lazy river, so I swam to him. Before I got there, entitled kid was coming inbound like a torpedo and came in front of me. Oh boy, here we go. Hey, OP. Hello. Is that a pool ring you have? Well, you're not blind, that's good. Can I have it? Sorry, no, this is mine. There are some... Why? Like I said, this is mine. There are still some people who might give you one if they aren't using it. But I want this one. Why this one? Because it's green. Like I said, I can't just give it to you. You gotta find a... But I want it! He proceeds to take it from me. Hey, give that back. Well, it's mine now. My friend comes over to see what's going on. Entitled Kid took my pool ring when I told him he can't have it. Entitled Kid, I'm going to ask again, can you give me back my pool ring? But it's mine! No, it's ours, and since you took it without my consent, then I take it back from him. No! Now, you're here for the title. Here goes. Entitled Kid pushes my head underwater with both his hands. I forgot how long I was underwater, but I remember fighting back. I grab his arm tightly and push it away. I was surprised he could keep me underwater. I finally got my head above water. What the heck? You almost drowned me. That was an over-exaggeration. I didn't stay underwater for that long. Me and my friend went back to the shallow end and talked to the group leader. He talked to Entitled Kid, and this is what happens. He goes to the water playground and finds a noodle. Group leader apologized to me. I told him I was okay. Me and friend went back into the water pretending like that didn't even happen. And you'd think that this 10-year-old would have learned his lesson after being chewed out by our group leader. Nope. The noodle I mentioned earlier is now relevant. I went to the pool playground and Entitled Kid came behind me and whacked me with the noodle firm on the back. I turned around and saw him running away like a killer clown was chasing him. I saw him going to the bottom of the slide and whacking friend with it too. We once again told group leader. When group leader was talking to him, the kid whacked him too. He's a brave yet stupid one. Yeah, we went home early. That was r/Entitled Kid, and if you watched this video and didn't hit the like button, then that makes you an entitled kid. Welcome to r/Today I F'd Up, where OP almost drowns in a lake of human poo. Today I F'd up by almost ruining my parents' marriage. This happened today, just a few minutes ago in fact. A bit of context, I got banned from Tinder a few years ago for selling feet pics. Whoops. But was recently single and wanted to get back in the game. After deciding other dating apps were a little too wholesome for me, I decided to go for Tinder. I needed a phone number that wasn't blocked, so I used my mom's and then called her to get the code. I figured she's like 60 and probably doesn't even know what a dating app is, so no harm, no foul, right? Today we're all sitting at the table getting ready to eat breakfast, and my stepdad comes out and sits down. He's calm as can be as he butters his toast. He glances up from his paper and says to all of us, "I'm packing my things and leaving this afternoon." I almost spit out my orange juice. My brothers start crying. Mom is sputtering, trying to figure out what's going on. She keeps asking why, and he pulls out a literal printed page from the Google search results of "What is Tinder?" He hands it to my mom. She doesn't even know what's going on at this point. She doesn't even remember giving me the code months ago. I grab the paper from her and read it, and realize where I effed up. I turn to my stepdad and let him know, frantically, that it was me. He asks why in the world I would need to use her phone to make the account. I scroll through my phone, find an album of different angles of my feet, and explain it to him. He was thoroughly disgusted and went back to their room through almost tears of laughter. I don't think he's still leaving, but my family will never look at me the same way again. Too long, didn't read, tried to sell feet pics, got banned from Tinder, used my mom's phone. Danger is afoot. OP, you realize that for the rest of your life, you can never wear flip-flops around your family members again. Today I effed up by almost drowning in a pit of human waste. So this didn't happen today, but a few months ago, but I never told anyone. A while back, the company I was working for was tearing out and removing an old waste treatment system that was shut down in the 70s. This was basically a massive underground pit where the waste solids, aka number 2, would settle in the bottom of the chamber and the liquid would come down. The thing is, when they shut it down, it was left full of number 2 and is by far one of the nastiest jobs I've ever done. We opened the pit by tearing off the top with equipment and bringing in trucks to pump out the waste. The pit was about 16 feet deep and filled to the top with solids. And when I'm talking solids, I'm talking tons and tons of condoms and for some reason pumpkin seeds, which I still don't understand to this day. One weekend, we got a bunch of rain. When it rained, we would pump the water out of the new sewer so we could remove the solids. Since it was the weekend and we had so much rain, my boss asked me to swing by and turn the pumps on so the water didn't get out of hand. So I went out to the job site alone to turn the pumps and suck the water out. When I got to the job site, I turned the pumps on, but they were clogged up. I decided to walk into the structure alone and clear the pumps, and that is the start of my breakup that almost cost me my life. Since I took my personal vehicle, I didn't have any of my equipment, so instead of using a harness, I went in without one, which is the first F up. The structure was underground, and the pit had large chambers that were broken into basically large upside-down V's that you could walk on the point, which was a foot or two wide. When I got down to the pumps and was crouched down cleaning them, I went to answer it, and that was my second F up. Being crouched, I had to turn my leg and try to get my phone out of my pocket, and my foot slipped on some gravel, and I slipped off the ledge and fell in. At this point, I wasn't really worried about anything besides the fact that I just landed in straight 40-year-old doo-doo up to my knees. However, when I started to move to get to the edge to get out, I started to sink. Like I said, this pit was 16 feet deep, and it was like being in quicksand. I tried to reach for the edge, but it was just out of my reach, and when I tried to move again, I was now a little over waist deep. At this point, I was still fine. Yes, I was covered in doo-doo, but normally, the city work guy comes around once or twice a week to check the site. So just chill there, wait for him to come, and he can get me out. Sure, I'm gonna be embarrassed, more than likely get in trouble, but I'd be fine. The thing is, while I stood there, still covered in dew, I noticed that I was still sinking, and that's when the panic set in. I couldn't wait. I had to get out or I was going to die. I was going to drown in 40-year-old human dew. My whole life had led to me drowning in dew. So I instantly tried to get out. I tried to kick my way out. I tried to pull myself out. I tried to swim on the top of it, all while sinking deeper and deeper. And nothing but the thought of the absolutely crazy way that I was going to die. At this point, I had sunk to my chest and I had pretty much lost all hope. I started to accept my fate and broke into a combination of hysterical laughter and cursing myself for my stupidity of going down there without a harness. I finally calmed down while reading the wrapper for a comedy from like the 60s, and I noticed a piece of rebar sticking out of one of the walls that we had started to tear down. I reached out and stretched myself out more than I ever think I've done in my life and was able to grab it. With every ounce of my strength, I managed to pull myself forward and then pull myself to the edge and get out. I got out of the pit and fell on the ground and looked up at the sky and lay there covered in dew and smelling worse than I ever did in my life and laughed. I was alive. My story had not ended by drowning in dew. I got up, found a water hose, and washed myself out. I threw my clothes away and drove home naked and took what was the best and longest shower of my life, and never told a soul how close I came to drowning in 40-year-old doo-doo. OP, I think that story is supposed to be kind of funny, but to be honest, that was horrifying. Reading that made me really tense and anxious. And at the end, when we were looking up at the sky laughing, I couldn't help but imagine that scene in Shawshank Redemption when he finally gets out of the prison. Man, what a story. Today I effed up by cheating on my significant other, and karma came fast. This actually happened about 10 years ago, and we split up because of it. Before I go any further, I want to point out that I am fully aware of how sucky and inexcusable cheating is. I was young and made a mistake that I paid for immediately. This is my story. So one night, my roommate invited me, 21 years old at the time, to the beach to see a bunch of people that knew from high school and hadn't seen since graduation. We'd spent all night in the bar drinking and taking shots. Eventually, the bar closed, so me, my roommate, and the remaining members of the group decided to grab the coolest from our friend's hotel and head towards the water to finish the night off with a few more beers and listen to the water. The waves seemed to be appearing from a void. This is about the time things started. We had been debating getting in the water, but this is not very smart, especially when we don't know the schedule of the tide. Plus, we were absolutely wasted. I was the first one to start heading that way, removing my clothes down to my underwear, when one of the girls we were with sprints past me. I turn around, and everyone is naked. I admit that at this point, I had not even considered how my girlfriend would have felt about this, and I got naked too. We'd been swimming for about 30 minutes when everyone started splitting up. This was during low tide, so you could be quite a ways away from shore and still be waist deep. I'd come up to this sandbar with this girl that I'd been friends with for years. Neither of us had ever realized how far away we'd strayed from the group or the shore. This is the moment I cheated. About halfway through the deed, I heard my roommate screaming our names at the top of our lungs. We were the only ones left out there and the tide was coming in. We made it only a few feet from the sandbar when I noticed what looked like fireflies in the water. I quickly realized that these were jellyfish and they were everywhere. We both frantically tried to hurry through, but they just kept coming. There were at least 50 to 75 that we could see. Suddenly, I felt a sharp sting across the back of both knees. I grabbed my friend by the wrist and started to pull her as I did my best run because now stuff had gotten serious. I made the one mistake that every beachgoer knows better than to do. I decided we needed to get out immediately and climbing the rocks would help. I didn't even get a single foot planted because my toe was immediately sliced open to the bone by a clam. Now I'm naked, pouring blood, and both of us had been stung all over. We started back towards the beach when I doubled over in pain, shooting through my dong and balls. I thought I'd been bitten by something, but it turns out a jellyfish had wrapped around my genitals. I had never been in pain like this before. When we finally got to the beach, we were surrounded by all our friends who heard us screaming and had called the police because they thought we'd come across a shark. It's almost 5 a.m. and the experience had completely sobered me up. The police were surprisingly cool about the whole situation, and one of them offered to walk us back to the hotel. Fast forward to later in the morning when my roommate had driven us home. When we got home, I started evaluating my injuries. I definitely needed stitches, but opted out because I didn't have insurance at the time. My dong looked horrendous, however. I couldn't even believe what this jellyfish had done to it. It was swollen, tender, and was a different shape. I took a handful of ibuprofen and took a shower before passing out for the remainder of the day until the evening when I wake up to my girlfriend crawling into the bed with me. My heart sank. She knew I had gone out the night before, and my roommate informed her of my rough night, excluding the fact that I betrayed her. She was there for maybe a total of 10 minutes before I completely broke down and confessed, but didn't tell her about the cut or the jellyfish. She never looked at me, never cried, and left without saying anything. I saw her about 4 years ago in a bar. She approached me and asked if we could talk for a while. She told me that she was never mad at me, and that after some time, she was just happy I was honest, after the apology. To which I replied, well, I've got something else to tell you about that night that you're going to love. She effing loved every second of hearing the rest of the events from that night. We laughed pretty hard about it. I paid for her tab and left. We haven't spoken since. OP, did you date the daughter of Poseidon? Because it seems like the ocean itself was angry about that cheating. Today I effed up by stripping down and sexually confronting my father-in-law. So this happened about an hour ago, and I'm just sitting in a cafe trying to stop cringing in embarrassment. I'm on vacation with my wife and her family, and we arrived at the hotel today, checked in, and settled into our rooms. A while later, a few of us headed out to explore. I went and met up with a friend who lived in the area, and we ended up having a few drinks. Earlier, while I was out, I'd gotten a text from my wife saying that she was switching our room with her parents, as ours had a balcony while theirs didn't, which her dad wanted some good sport, and that she was going out for dinner with her mom. Anyway, I saw it and said, okay, we just switched keycards with her once I got back. A few hours later, I was a bit drunk and my friend dropped me back at the hotel. The text had completely slipped my mind, and so I headed to the room with the balcony where her parents were staying, and thinking it was ours, went right in. As I went in, I heard the shower running in the bathroom, and feeling promiscuous, I decided to give who I thought was my wife in the shower a little surprise. So I stripped down, completely naked, and seeing that the door was slightly ajar, decided to barge in. So I did, while also announcing quite loudly, Daddy's home. The sight that lay The sight that lay before me is one that'll be stuck in my mind forever. My father-in-law, naked in the shower, looking at it in the mixture of disbelief, confusion, and mostly anger. I froze, and for a second, we just stood there in silence, which was soon broken by him shouting, "What the OP?" At this point, my flight response kicked in, and as fast as I could, rushed out, dressed faster than I ever had before in my life, and ran out the room. Since I don't have the key card for the other room, I sure as hell am not going back to ask for it. I'm now sitting at this cafe outside the hotel. I'm waiting for my wife to get back from her dinner, as I don't really think I can explain what just happened over the phone. If I can explain it without dying of embarrassment at all. So yeah, the family brunch tomorrow should be interesting. Update. My father-in-law told my mother-in-law and wife, and both of them pretty much died of laughter. He also isn't too upset, just told my wife to tell me I know who daddy is around here, who promptly relayed this message to me. I'm currently with the wife in our room, trying to get the aforementioned image out of my mind and avoiding the in-laws at all costs. Then we have some great contributions down in the comments. First from Amavel. I once goosed my father-in-law at a museum, like got really deep in there, like 2 knuckles deep with a death pinch. He whipped around and my heart sank. Apparently, he and my husband look a lot alike from behind. The museum was on the waterfront. Seriously considered drowning myself in the river. And then a post from Green Prepper. Reminds me of a game I saw played at a wedding where the bride, who was blindfolded, had to pick her new husband out of a line of groomsmen and other family members by only feeling their butts. After some pretty intimate research, she declared she had found her hubby. She pulled her blindfold off and found her face to face with her father-in-law. Today I effed up by making such a disgusting smell from my butt, it evacuated a courtroom. So this happened about 5 hours ago. So today I woke up and had really painful cramps due to the deadly woman's monthly cycle, mixed with some spiced chicken that hadn't set right in my belly all night. I go to the toilet about 3 times before work this morning, but it's eased off a bit. So I take tablets, grin and bear it, and then leave for work. Now, my job is working within the prison system and escorting prisoners to certain places, including courts. This is where it all went downhill. I had to escort this prisoner over to the witness box and stand next to her in open court. So I do my usual, but my tummy has started to really hurt again. I'm trying my absolute best to put off a fart, which I know is boring, but can't hold it much longer. So I do a really silent one and pat myself on the back, thinking I'd gotten away with it. That is, until the prisoner starts coughing and retching and shouting, "What the F is that?" I quickly realize what it must be, but can't admit to such a foul, putrid smell, so I start crinkling my nose as well as gagging. The admin clerk walks slightly closer and retches so hard she had to swiftly put her head in the bin. By this point, it's getting loud and chaos is starting to ensue. Not what you want in court, in front of the district judge. He quickly tells me to take the prisoner back over to the closed dock and states it must be the pipes. He stands down the whole of the court and makes maintenance come in to check all pipes for leaks, cracks, anything that could have made that smell happen. The prisoner still has has watery eyes. I'm pretending to gag and the clerk is sipping water next to a bucket. OP, it's inhumane to torture prisoners. What's wrong with you? That was r/today I effed up, and if you don't subscribe to my channel, then you definitely effed up. Welcome to r/petty revenge, where OP gleefully steals someone's donuts. This happened a couple years ago. It had snowed a bunch, and so I went out to clear a spot for my boyfriend at the time for when he got home from work. He's a police officer. I spent a while digging it out, and as I was finishing up, some girl drove up and parked in it while I was still shoveling it. I told her that I had just dug it out, intending to use it, and asked her to move, and she didn't. She then got out of her car and walked away. Turns out she lived 2 buildings down, so she wouldn't normally park there anyways. Our complex had a mini snowplow, and the dude was plowing in the area and saw this all go down. He helped me move all the snow from the pile he just created and put it all around her car. We buried it up to the door handles on all sides. He then dug out a new spot for me. I saw her later trying to dig out her car. Turns out she didn't have a shovel. So, naturally, because I'm petty, I went out and reshoveled the sidewalk from the lot up to our building and threw all of the snow on her vehicle while I did it. Then went inside and took my shovel with me. I don't understand why people steal other people's parking spaces right in front of them and then walk away all smug like they've won. Because then you've just pissed off someone and showed them your unattended car. Is that how you want your car to get keyed? Because that's how you get your car keyed. Or worse, your tire slashed, your rear view windows broken off. There's so much an angry person can do to an unattended car, so why risk it? It makes no sense to me. And then we have a similar post from Sloppy Moses. This may be the pettiest thing I have ever done. So in my city, there is a pub that's attached to a donut shop that serves the best donuts in the city, which always causes a long line. Because it's attached to a pub, it doesn't close shop until 9 p.m. as there is a solid flow of business rolling in. Anyway, my girlfriend and I get a serious hankering for some snacks, so we decide to head to the donut shop and arrive at around 8:30 p.m. by car. Now, there are only 3 parallel parking spots a little up the street from the place, and they are all 15-minute spots, which are usually full. We see up the street that, count our lucky stars, a spot is free. My girlfriend pulls a little ahead of the car in front of the spot, turns on her indicator, and begins backing into the parking spot, when this little white Vespa driving behind us whips into the spot. I roll down our window and call out the driver. "Excuse me, we were just backing in." The driver seems to be a pretty university student who shrugs her shoulders and calls out to me, "Sorry, first come, first served," while her and her friend share a good laugh. My girlfriend suggests we just get donuts another time, and I tell her she can drop me off here. I'll buy the donuts since I know what she likes and she can loop around. She agrees, and I pop out of the car, past the little white Vespa where the girls are still gathering their things, and head to the shop. As always, the line is super long for donuts, and since this is the last batch, the donuts are slim pickings. The girls are behind me looking at the 5 or so different flavors that are left, talking about which ones are the best and which they haven't had yet. I hear one of them jokingly mention, "Thank God we got a parking spot," and they burst out laughing. I get to the front of the line and when asked for my order, request 2 dozen donuts, which is every last one remaining. The girls behind me didn't listen to what I ordered, but eyebrows of confusion started to form on their faces, and they slowly saw each donut loaded into the boxes and their options dwindle. One of them, the driver, in desperation asked the baker who was loading them in, "What, you're not even gonna save a few for us though?" To which I turned around and said, "Sorry, first come, first serve." She honestly looked like she simultaneously solved a movie mystery and messed her pants. It's difficult to put into words, but truly an expression I can never forget. Best donuts I ever tasted, and enjoyed by the rest of my office the next morning. Yeah, never mind. Forget what I said about keying the car or kicking off the rearview mirrors. Stealing their donuts and eating them in front of them while they regret their life choices is a way better route for revenge. Then we have this contribution from GT Shelby down in the comments. I had a woman steal my parking spot that I had been waiting patiently for at work once. She zipped in even though it was obvious I was waiting there, turned signal on for the spot to be free. The lady in the spot finally pulls out and turns towards me, so I can't pull into it quickly. And the jerk pulled into it. I could see her laughing as she did so. F it, I'll find another spot, and finally did so. A few minutes later, I'm in my store and get called to the return desk for a customer complaint. A lady was pissed we wouldn't do a return for an item without a receipt. There's a limit of 3 in 6 months, and she was past it, and wanted a manager to make an exception. I get to the desk, and lo and behold, guess who it was? Parking spot thief. I put on my best retail smile and politely told her not only no, but F no. When she started to raise heck, I told her to leave or be banned from the store. She skulked out. My desk associates told me she was notorious for being a returnaholic and that LP was already investigating her for fraud. Our next Reddit post is really issues. On mobile, forgive my text wall. This happened to me last night. I got in my car to pick up my girlfriend and my tire pressure light came on. I have a 12-volt air compressor in my back seat, but it's loud and fills sort of slowly, so I opted to drive to the local Wawa. For those who don't have Wawa, it's like if 7-Eleven got sober and went to college. Wawa's air pumps are free to use, which usually means there are at least a few cars lined up. But when I pulled in, there was only one other car. Score. I pulled behind the guy filling his tires, and an older gentleman in a BMW pulled in behind me. After about 3 minutes, a woman in a brand new Lexus pulls up directly next to me and puts her window down. "I only have to fill one tire. Do you mind if I go in front of you?" she asked. I said, "Actually, I do. We've been waiting here for a little bit. Sorry." She muttered something while rolling her window up, and I put up mine. About a minute later, the guy at the pump was done. He backs up, and before I can even put my car in gear, Lexus woman pulls her car in front of mine diagonally, blocking me from pulling into the spot, and then pulls straight in after the first guy's moved. She climbs out of her car and gives me the most infuriating little wave. At this point, my anger gives way to a ninja-like calm, and I know exactly what must be done. I pull my car forward and stop about 6 inches from her rear bumper. The air pump is in the corner of the lot, so Lexus woman has a curb in front of her, a curb to her right, where the pump is, and now my dirty car right behind her brand new one. She's busy filling her tire and doesn't notice that I've pulled right up to her car. I step out of my car, grab my air compressor from the back seat, and start setting it up to fill my tire. Mr. BMW, who has remained completely still and silent, sees what I'm doing and asks if I can fill his tires too. I say, of course, and motion for him to park in the empty spot to Lexus lady's left. As soon as he pulls in, she notices what's happening and starts yelling. I flip on my air compressor and begin filling my tire. Her cries drowned out by the sound of 250 psi of justice. She comes and stands in front of me, face beet red and little flecks of spittle popping out from between her cigarette teeth as she calls me all sorts of names. I calmly say, "Ma'am, I only have one tire to fill. You don't mind, do you?" Mr. BMW is absolutely loving this. And as I finish my tire and move to fill his, she starts up again. "You mother effers, effing piece of doo-doo buttholes," etc. I finish Mr. BMW's tire and he thanks me for my help, climbs in his car, and pulls away grinning. I wrap my compressor up nicely, pick a good song, and set my climate control to a balmy 82 degrees. All while Lexus lady is trapped in front of me. I calmly back up, give her a little wave, and drive off into the night. OP, honestly, I don't know how you resisted the urge to go to the bathroom and grab a quick snack from Wawa. Our next Reddit post is from, "Can ducks give STDs?" Good question, OP. So, I'm married to a wonderful woman. She's smart, funny, and very kind. Her mother is generally very nice and tends to have a great attitude and be very enjoyable. A bit of a prude, but generally enjoyable. However, can be a bit of a major snoop. If my wife leaves her phone sitting around, she'll just pick it up and start going through it. My wife has kind of laughed this off as a remnant of her mom being controlling when she was a kid. I'm not a fan of this because my wife and I will sometimes text about things that simply don't involve her mother, and I don't feel are her business at all. So over Christmas, I saw my wife set her phone down on the kitchen counter, and I had a brilliant idea. Her mom was still in the kitchen, and I sent my wife the most sexually depraved text about all the things I was going to do to her when everyone left. Honestly, most of them are things we haven't even done, but I had to make it extra scarring. I sent this text from the bathroom, and maybe it was my imagination, but I could swear I could hear an audible gasp shortly after her phone went off. When I went out, her mother absolutely would not look me in the eye. Then, not so discreetly, asked her daughter to come talk to her in the other room. When my wife came back into the living room, I thought she had been crying. However, upon closer inspection, she was laughing. Her mother had questioned her about me abusing her during passionate hugging, and if I always talked down to her like that. My wife had told her kindly that what we do is between us and us only. Probably the best gift this Christmas. Did anyone else think that he was gonna send his wife a dick pic? because as entertaining as this post already is, that would have been a much better story. Our next Reddit post is from Tens Anyone. This happened years ago, but still makes me smile. I started working in a corporate office in a secretarial position for my first job after college. There were two older ladies who were also secretaries working in the office. One of them was just fine, but I spent most of my time sitting beside and working with Agnes. Agnes was quickly approaching retirement age, but wasn't going anywhere without a big push. This was in the days where we just started getting computers, and she was absolutely hopeless. She'd pull stuff like, "I can't answer the phone, I'm on the computer." Multitasking was not in this woman's repertoire. She was super fussy and annoying. If I came back from lunch 5 minutes late, she would loudly exclaim, "OMG, there you are. I was wondering what had happened to you," making sure the whole office knew I was late. Meanwhile, she was usually late coming in the morning, and often left early for various appointments. If I made a typo in a document, she would make sure the rest of the staff knew about it, loudly. She tended to pout when things didn't go her way, and she would, quote, quit her job when someone pissed her off. And then my boss's boss would talk her into staying. I'd heard about this tactic of hers, and one day our boss did something that annoyed her, and she quit again. My boss's boss was away that day, so I had my chance. I quickly advertised and planned a big retirement party for her. It was a done deal by the end of the day. People were dropping by and congratulating her, and everyone looked forward to the party. At that point, I guess she figured it was too late to pull her usual shenanigans, and she actually retired. I told my boss to not bother replacing her because it was freaking easy to cover the little work she actually accomplished every day. This is kind of an old meme, but in this case, the cake is literally a lie. That was r/petty revenge, and this is the first time I've covered this subreddit, so let me know down in the comments if you want to see more petty revenge. Welcome to r/petty revenge, where people get back at everyday jerks. When I worked at Walmart, I went from cart pusher to cashier to electronics to security. Sometimes, after I switched to security, when electronics was really swamped, I'd help out for a few minutes. One day, the phone was ringing and I was walking by and randomly answered it. Sir Scamalot said, "Hello, sir. This is Steam Support Services with Valve." Instantly, of course, I know this is a scam. I adore Valve and played so many of their games too. I can't believe my luck. Of all the calls to answer, surprisingly, he didn't have some weird accent. "Oh, what can I do for you?" "We've had reports that game keys shipped to your location may have an error that prevents it from authenticating. Specifically, the game Counter-Strike. You need to validate your game keys to see if yours are affected." I forget which Counter-Strike was on sale then. This was 2008. "Oh, what do I do?" As if I didn't know. "Well, I just need you to open any copies of the game you have and read me the CD key on the instruction manual so I can verify them with our validation software." Or in the true case, I don't remember that either. "Sure thing. Can you put your hold for me while I get those?" Sir Scamalot was seriously happy. "Sure." So I sir, just open any copy of Counter-Strike and on the... Oh, Counter-Strike. I thought you said Counter-Strikes, the holy game. Okay, everyone in the department is listening. 10 minutes later, I'm probably wrong. Okay, I got what you're looking for. Now, I make him walk me through how to open the box, including interrogating him for 5 minutes about how to do it without breaking the seal, then pretend I can't find the code, etc., etc. Finally, I'm ready to read the code. First, I read him the UPC. This upsets him. Then I read him a part number from something. Now he's livid. Finally, I ask him if he means the code on the book that says game key and has like groups of 4 digits with dashes, like he said probably 50 times already, and he gets excited again. Oh, okay, here's the game key. Okay, F is in Frank, U like uncle, C like cat. Sir, I don't think that's right. Normally a code would... No, it's F, U, C, then K like kite, next 4 is Y like yesterday, O like owl, and he swore at me and hung up. That was such an obvious scam. Valve would never call someone on the phone. They're all too busy developing Half-Life 3. Our next Reddit post is from Angry Cat. My ex-husband and I bought our home from his parents. They had the house built in the 50s. For years, father-in-law wanted to install a shutoff valve in the utility room to, shut off the water to the whole house to do some repairs. The plumber told him it would cost a large amount of money because they couldn't find the shutoff from the city water main at the street, the Buffalo Box, aka the water main shutoff valve. Since the Buffalo Box was MIA, they would have to freeze the pipes to stop the water before installing the shutoff valve. It was an expensive process to freeze the pipes, so it never got done. When we bought the house, we decided to get the shutoff valve installed. We called the water department and they sent 2 workers to shut off the water. When they arrived, I explained the problem. They went out to the front yard, walked around a bit, and told me there was nothing they could do for me. According to the 2 workers, it was my problem that they couldn't find the Buffalo Box, and that I should call a plumber to dig up my front yard, sidewalk, and city easement to find my Buffalo Box. Well, I have a background in residential real estate construction, and I was familiar with how water mains and Buffalo Boxes are installed, and I told them it was the city's issue, as they were responsible for the Buffalo Box, not the homeowners. According to these guys, as a woman, I didn't know what I was talking about, and they left. They were incredibly rude about it, but peons like these think they can get away with being rude to an ignorant woman like me. Fast forward to a year or so later, I get a call from the city manager asking why I hadn't paid my water bill for over a year. I told him that I wanted to pay my water bill, but I wanted them to first turn off my water. He was a bit taken aback that I wanted them to turn off the water. So I explained what the city workers told me about locating the Buffalo Box and their attitude about women not understanding those types of things. I also told him that if the city could not turn off my water, I would be happy to have free water forever, cause I would never pay another bill. We had a nice long chat about the situation, and he said that he would resolve my concerns. The next day, these same 2 guys show up at my house with some digging equipment and spend the whole day digging up the easement and the sidewalk. Their attitudes were rather somber, cause the city manager told me he was going to give them a talking to about how they mishandled the situation. I even got an apology. They found the Buffalo Box under the city-owned sidewalk. They fixed the Buffalo Box so it would be accessible and came the next day to fix the sidewalk. They asked if I wanted the water turned off. I declined, and I told them I would have my plumber take care of it when we had him install the interior shutoff valve. And then I paid the water bill. That's such a power move. Ma'am, if you don't pay the water bill, we're gonna have to turn off your water. Okay, good luck. It's such a win-win situation. Either they do what she originally wanted and they find her water main to turn off the water, or they don't find the water main, in which case she gets free water for the rest of her life. Our next Reddit post is from Callie Blair. I have one incredible, the HOA isn't the butthole in this case story. My dad is African American and went on a walk around the community park around 3 in the afternoon. He was wearing jeans, a polo, etc. Someone who had recently moved in, maybe only 2 weeks, sent an email to the president of the HOA because they were unable to attend the meeting. They said they had a photo of a suspicious person who had been obviously casing people's houses to rob them, and included photos of my dad. The president of the HOA emailed back that they were very concerned after seeing the photos and would stop by her house to discuss the issue in person. They scheduled a time to talk and come up with safety strategies. My dad is the president of the HOA. He said the look on her face when she opened the door was priceless. He then proceeded to discuss the issue with her. Like she hadn't emailed a picture of him asking her, "Now, why did you feel concerned for your safety? And what about him made you think this man was a threat?" She didn't send any more complaints. I feel like your dad could have been like, "Oh, and by the way, I noticed that you haven't brought in your garbage can yet. I am afraid that's a $50 fine." Our next Reddit post is from Cookie Monster 1997. A couple months back, my boyfriend and I went out for drinks one night at this cool little speakeasy in Montreal. It's actually quite an interesting place. You come in through a nondescript entrance and the place has a really nice vibe going on once you get inside. Note, this is one of those bars where the server comes to your table and serves the drinks rather than one where you order at the bar and take the drinks back yourself. We were seated at our table by the server. We ordered a couple cocktails, and then a couple more, and then a couple more after that. Each time we had to order, my boyfriend or I would have to go fetch the server so he could take our order or go up to the bar, order, and then bring the drinks back ourselves. Then, when it came time for the bill, I went up again so he would come to our table. He came and thought we were going to order again despite me clearly asking for the bill when I went up. So he went back to get the card machine and it was another 10 minutes before he was back. At this point, I was quite ticked off at the not so great service and was debating whether or not I should tip him. The screen had an option for 10%, 15%, 20%, or other. I decided to just leave 10% as I wanted to avoid an argument with the server. Montreal service employees are pretty freaking notorious when it comes to the expectation of tips. Now, he prints out the receipt and takes a look at it and sees I left 10%. He then asks if we had a nice evening, to which my boyfriend responded that we did. We both thought it was just a standard question servers ask, so we didn't bother telling him about the poor service received, especially because it wouldn't really make a difference at this point. The guy then says, "Oh, well, if you had such a nice time, then you should have left at least a 15% tip. Because in Canada, it's customary to leave a minimum 15% when the service is good." I'm guessing the reason he felt the need to outline that's how it is in Canada is because I'm a brown guy. Now comes the petty part. I responded, "Oh, I didn't know. Why don't I cancel this bill and redo it so I can tip you properly?" He said, "Sure thing, just give me a second because the manager has to approve bill cancellations." Again, we waited a good 10 minutes for him to come back with the new bill. I was happy to wait though, because once he came back, I put in the PIN and then selected the other option for tip and left him 0%. He printed out the receipt and his look of disbelief was well worth it. We got up and my white Canadian boyfriend said, "Our only tip to you is to give better service and not be so much of a butthole. In Canada, we don't really like buttholes." So to all my Canadian viewers out there, what's the deal? As an American, the stereotype I always hear is that Canadians are super duper polite, but OP is making it sound like Canadian waiters are kinda jerks. Is that a thing in Canada? Our next Reddit post is from Past Life God. This story takes place my 3rd year of college. I was taking a class where the entire grade was determined by a semester-long final project. We were supposed to be in groups of 3 in the project, but the 3rd guy in our group had more sense than me and bailed early. This left just me and Lazy Girl. Lazy Girl didn't do anything the every semester. I would ask her to work on pieces of the project, but she always had an excuse for why it wasn't done yet. Or, in her case, started. Now, I didn't want any confrontation with this girl, as she was my friend at the time. But I finally lost it one night towards the end of the semester. I asked her to meet at my house to work on the project, but something important came up. Fed up with this one-sided partnership, I decided to air my woes at the local bars. And guess who I run into? Lazy girl and her boyfriend drinking. She made up some BS excuse, and I made a plan. I powered through the entire assignment, except for the conclusion, which I asked Lazy Girl to finish. I held out exactly zero hope that she would finish this section. So I quickly finished it myself and turned in my project with a little note to the teacher. The note detailed how I had done literally everything for the project and that, despite my best efforts, I could not get Lazy Girl to contribute. I said that I was turning in my version and that our conclusion sections may differ, as I'd asked her to actually do that part herself. So here's a little tidbit about our final projects. We each had to turn one in. Lazy Girl not only didn't do the conclusion, she didn't turn in a project at all. She tried calling and complaining at me for not giving her credit, to which I went off on her for not doing anything on the entire project. I mentioned how I even gave her the opportunity to turn in my work for a grade if she'd only do one thing. She hung up after that, and that was the last time we spoke. This was a college class, and college classes are expensive. The only thing missing from this post is OP adding in how much that class cost, and therefore how much Lazy Girl wasted on failing that class. That was r/petty revenge, and if you want to support me in this channel, you can buy my merchandise with the link down in the description. Welcome to r/pro revenge, where a cheater ends up jobless and homeless. I live in a 10-story apartment building in a dense part of a city with numerous other tall complexes, but also a number of old single-family homes. One such home abuts my building, directly under my 8th floor apartment. The longtime owner has had a pigeon coop in his backyard for years. The birds smell and are a nuisance, but no big deal. Then, about 6 months ago, the owner took it upon himself to dump 20 pounds of bird seeds in his backyard daily, attracting 200 to 250 city pigeons. They are ferals that lived in a nearby park, but once the feeding started, they ended up hanging out on my neighbor's roof most of the day, every day. Complaints to him to desist were fruitless. Numerous neighbors also complained to city officials, but they were useless. Animal rights activists on our city council who halted a pigeon control program a few years back as cruelty to animals are very pro-animal. They refuse to take action under the pretext that there is no sort of nuisance law the city could use in this case. The smell from the pigeon droppings in his yard progressively got worse, and the birds started roosting on our property and dumping on parked cars. Several disgruntled neighbors, including me, pondered a solution for months. A neighbor and I arrived at a solution, artificially escalating the nuisance level of the problem, specifically the bird reek, so the city can no longer ignore the nuisance. It had to be logical, secretive, and calibrated. Someone couldn't throw dog poop onto his property and expect an outcome. Long story short, we concocted an odorous slurry. Using my 8th floor balcony directly over the pigeon lover's backyard, I gave it gradually increasing midnight sprinkling of slurry, which disappeared into the grass in his messy backyard. Within 1 week, the increased odor emanating from his property reached half a block away. Suddenly, the problem was resolved. We didn't see the official action, but word was that several prominent businessmen who own a restaurant down the street complained to the mayor about the stench. The city took action. The guy is now only allowed to keep about 15 pigeons in coops. No more feeding the ferals. An unorthodox solution to a problem that needed to be dealt with. Great solution, OP, but not where I thought this story was going. To be honest, I thought you and your neighbors were gonna start sticking your butts over the edge of the balconies and taking a dump on your neighbor's house. That probably also would have been effective, but in a very different way. Now, how many of you are imagining a butt sticking over the balcony and dumping onto the neighbor's house? If so, please hit that like button because it really helps me out. Our next Reddit post is from Genevieve. This story takes place almost 12 years ago, so I'll do my best with the dialogue and details, but admittedly, some things are a little fuzzy. Most of my life, I've had a problem with picking men that were not good for me. So much so that I even had a phrase for it: saving the world one moron at a time. One of my more spectacularly bad choices was a guy by the name of Bob. Obviously, not his real name. I met Bob when I was working one of my 2 jobs at the local mall. He worked somewhere else in the mall, so we hit it off, and soon enough, we were in a relationship. Within a few months, my lease was up, and we ended up moving in together, which obviously in hindsight was a huge mistake. But I was dumb and lonely. Soon enough, red flags began to fly. He would say things in common conversations that were simply incorrect, like, "There's only 4 continents and the rest are actually owned by the Martian government and thus don't count," etc. And when challenged, would circular talk until you either agreed with him or dropped the subject. He would also make claims that seemed entirely unbelievable, such as when I asked where he had been staying prior to his mom's house. He said he camped in the woods. When I asked how he did that for months on end and without any gear, he simply gestured to himself and said, "This is all the gear I need." The worst trait, though, by far, was his epic laziness. I have never witnessed someone so lazy in my life. Bob was unemployed for over a third of our relationship and would simply sit in the apartment watching Netflix or playing some war game on his computer, aka my spare computer, typing away in the group chat. He would never clean up after himself, leaving dirty dishes in the sink and filth on every surface, while taking a shower maybe once a week. The smell that permeated my apartment could only be described as revolting and could easily gag a maggot. I would inquire a few times a week on his job hunt, only to be dismissed or given a growing amount of excuses such as, "But I don't have a car, how would I get there? The bus doesn't run in that area. The internet went down, so I couldn't apply," etc., etc. Meanwhile, I'm working double and triple shifts at my job to try to make up the lost income and running him all over town in my off time, getting applications and helping him fill them out and turn them in. Keep in mind, he doesn't have a cell phone, so all of these apps have my contact info on them. Thus begins the era of him holding my phone while I'm at work, so he can make calls or schedule interviews, and also I can get a hold of him from my store phone if I needed to. Things began getting weird. He began staying up later and later on this group chat, sometimes till almost dawn. Sometimes he would hang out all evening until it was time for bed. Then he would always make some excuse on why he needed to check the game before bed, and he'd be right there. Hours would pass. No Bob. I began to get suspicious, but nothing incriminating seemed to be taking place, so I just shrugged it off as me being insecure. Then he started asking to use my car to go see his best friend, Ben. Now, I wasn't super comfortable with this, but I did know Ben pretty well, and we got along almost better than Bob and I did. So I guess to a degree I trusted Ben more than Bob and agreed to it. This happened a few times while I was working the evening shift, and he was always back at the allotted time with my car and my phone, and relatively grateful for the opportunity to hang out with his buds. Suspicious? Yes, but I'm the kind of person that is loyal and trusting to a fault, and don't assume anything without proof, and from every angle, all seem to be on the up and up, so I took it at face value. So one day, he asked to borrow my car and go with his friends to a card gaming tournament. He put on a great show, telling me how the prize money would help us out, and with the deck he had, there was no way he could lose. I just had to let him use my car and phone this one last time, and he would be able to buy himself a phone with the prize money. I wasn't a huge fan of the idea, but nothing untoward had occurred in the previous instances, and I didn't feel like spending my only day off at a card game convention that I literally couldn't care less about, so I acquiesced. I bought myself a couple green monsters and some vodka and had my own little personal drunk party. Hours tick by, and no Bob. Eventually, I pass out, only to wake up at the crack of dawn, violently sick. This went way beyond a hangover. I started retching in the bathroom until there was nothing left but bile, but the retching wouldn't stop. Hours ticked by, and I lay in my bathroom floor sweating and convulsing with no phone, no car, and no Bob. I eventually was able to crawl to my room and wrap myself in a bathrobe before crawling down my apartment building stairs and began knocking on the closest doors. It took 3 apartments before someone opened the door and allowed me to use their phone to call my mom. My mother was at my apartment in 6 minutes flat and rushed me to the ER, where I was diagnosed with an aggressive and antibiotic resistant strain of C. diff. Bob finally showed up later that afternoon, phone and car keys in hand, looking very concerned and claiming to be deeply apologetic, but my mom hated him from that point on. I was out of the hospital and back to work within a few days, but it was the beginning of the end. During these last months, we were constantly scraping by due to his lack of consistent income and poor spending habits. There were jobs gotten and there were jobs lost for various reasons throughout our relationship, but the final job was the one I helped him get literally 3 buildings down from my own workplace. This company rents furniture and electronics on a weekly or monthly basis, and I happen to know most of the employees and the hiring manager as they are regular customers at my coffee establishment. I was able to use what little sway I had to get him on there, and he accepted a job as a delivery man. Within a few weeks, I come home from work to find a brand new TV and entertainment system, and him grinning like an idiot. I tell him we can't afford this. We can barely afford to eat and are surviving off scraps I bring home from work. He talks about his amazing employee discount and assures me it's no big deal, that the rental fee will just come out of his paycheck, etc. I was pissed. Not only had he not consulted me, he also had me on the account as well. My info had been taken from the credit application I filled out as a favor to help their numbers. So if he flaked, I was liable. Fast forward another few weeks, the rent is late and we're receiving eviction notices on our door. I come home from work and the TV is mysteriously gone. Thank goodness, I think. He finally realized we can't afford it and took it back. He gets paid, rent gets paid, and all is as good as it can be. Until I found a pawn slip for the TV in his pocket as I was doing laundry and went ballistic. He assured me he had plans to get it back in the works and to not worry about it. It'll be taken care of soon and no one will be the wiser. I was too pissed to catch on to the secrecy aspect of the situation. A few more tense weeks go by with him working mornings and myself working evenings while we shared one phone and car. Until that fateful day arrived. I woke up that morning with a migraine headache and opted to let Bob take the car but leave me the phone so I can call someone later on for a ride to work. A few hours of uncomfortable sleep go by before I'm awoken by my phone. I answer the phone, still groggy. Hello? There is a long pause on the other end of the line until a female voice asks, is Bob there? I felt a sickening feeling in my gut and began to shake. Is this real? Am I dreaming? No, he's at work right now, but this is his wife. Total lie, but hey. Is there something I can help you with? I wasn't rude. I phrased it as a genuine question rather than an accusation. Another long pause before she began to stammer about maybe she had the wrong number, but it was obvious she just wanted to get off the phone with me as quickly as possible. And I realized in that moment that I desperately needed her. Please, I said with an edge of desperation in my voice. I don't know what's going on, but I just really need somebody to tell me the truth. The last word came out in a sob, and I just sat there for a moment in silence, trying to quell the urge to just cry uncontrollably. Listen, the voice on the other end was almost gentle. I need to make a few phone calls, but I promise you, I will call you back. She said it calmly and with so much conviction that I really wanted to believe her. Please? You promise? I almost begged. I promise, she replied. Okay, I took a deep breath and released it. I'll talk to you soon, and hung up. I then proceeded to aggressively pace my living room floor, staring at my phone while chain smoking and muttering to myself like a crazy person. I knew who she was calling. I was replaying all those little red flag moments in my head from the last few months, pinning down dates or behavior I'd found suspect when the phone rings again. It's her. I froze for a moment, shocked she followed through and called me back. Terrified of what this meant, I answered the phone, and what followed was about the most soul-crushing 45 minutes of my life. After initial introductions, June, again not the real name, and I began comparing stories, and it became glaringly obvious what was happening. They had actually been in a relationship several years prior and had run back into each other on the aforementioned war game, where they began to flirt on group chat. All those nights he'd been on the computer, he'd been chatting with her. All those times he'd go hang out with his friends, he'd been using my car to take her out, and my phone to communicate with her. The time I was sick and alone with no resources, you guessed it, he was with her. Oh, but it gets better. Do you have a little silver hummingbird necklace? She inquired. Yes, my mother gave it to me for my 27th birthday. Actually, I love it. Really? Because he gave me one for Mother's Day. OMG! I almost yelled into the phone as I ran to my room and tore through my jewelry box. It wasn't in there. It was around her neck. From there, we discovered not only had he been giving her my property as gifts, but he'd had her over to our apartment, passing it off as his own. I didn't want to believe him capable of doing something so cruel and disrespectful when I have allowed him to sponge off me for the better part of 3 years. Unfortunately, as in confirmation, she began describing my apartment to a T, all the way down to my bed sheets. June said he even pulled my secret box from beneath my bed and offered to use my adult items on her. She said she found it weird and didn't partake, but I threw them away due to the sheer ick factor. Finally, she uttered the words I didn't know I wanted to hear. You know what we should do? We should bust him together. My mind immediately started racing. Indeed, we should. I was a mix of fury, adrenaline, and despair, so my thinking wasn't exactly straight, and details begin to get hazy here. We arranged to meet up at work and to find a way to lure Bob over there, but unfortunately, she lived about 40 minutes away, whereas I only live about 6 miles from our destination, so if I got there first, I need to stall him, assuming he wasn't out on delivery. I called a trusted coworker of mine at work, sobbing and begging for a ride. To his everlasting credit, he got somebody to cover and left work to come get me and bring me to my car. When I got to Bob's workplace, I went inside to retrieve my keys. This isn't uncommon, as they know the car is mine, and was stopped halfway through the store by Bob's manager, wanting to talk about the payment due on our account. I don't remember the exact dialogue, but I said something along the lines of, "Look, I don't know when you're going to get your payment." I looked utterly defeated and told him we could never afford the TV in the first place, and how I had begged Bob to take it back, and now we don't have it anymore as Bob has pawned it and I don't have the money to get it out, let alone pay him. I was full on blubbering at this point when he sought me to clarify that his employee pawned a rental TV under contract. I confirmed that this was indeed true and presented him with the pawn ticket. He was mad. Apparently, such an act is illegal and has terms for immediate termination. but he assured me that if I could get the TV back to him, there would be no harm and no foul, and he would terminate my contract without a hearing. I thanked him for his understanding and told him to let Bob know I would be over at my workplace. My heart is pounding in my chest and blood is roaring in my ears. What was I going to say? What was he going to say? Would June make it here before he did? My heart sinks when I see Bob's hulking form making its way in my direction. I frantically scan the parking lot for June's car. She's not here yet, and I'm out of time. He hits the door looking out of breath and guilty as heck, and I just stare at him stone-faced. I walk outside silently to light a cigarette, unsure of exactly what to say, and he follows me wordlessly outside. He starts in with the, "It's not what it seems," and "It's all just a terrible misunderstanding." And I just let him dig himself deeper into his hole of lies. I listen, I nod, I pretend to understand until a particular car pulls into view. June parks in the space directly next to where we were standing and gets out of the car. "Hey Bob, how you doing?" Bob has gone visibly pale. He hangs his head and sits down on the curb, saying nothing to either of us. June and I greet each other and awkwardly shake hands before again returning our attention to Bob. June begins berating him on his lies and deceit, unveiling all of our mutual info and subsequent conclusions while I stood mostly in silence, agreeing at the appropriate times, but mostly still in shock. After 20 minutes of this, I finally mustered up the courage to take my stand. "We are done. I don't want to see you ever again. I'll pack up your things, only 2 boxes worth, and your sister can contact me in a few days to pick them up. Now, I want your key." I held out my hand and looked at him. "Not until I get my stuff out, then you get your key," he replied. I tried to argue, but he continued to refuse and used his large stature to his advantage, knowing I'd have no chance in a physical altercation. He turned and walked away, heading back to his workplace. June and I talked a little more before she handed me my hummingbird necklace and left. I stood there alone, staring at nothing, trying to wrap my head around what had just transpired. And then I cried. Oh, how I cried. With nowhere else to turn, I had only one call to make. To my mom. The moment she answered, I unleashed this deluge of words at her that were half sobs and half rant. "Stay right there, I'm coming," she said. God bless my mother. Soon enough, both of my parents pull up in my dad's truck, and my mom gets out to comfort me and give me hugs. I look at the driver's seat and see my father with his jaw clenched and a death grip on the steering wheel while staring straight ahead. Oh, crud. They take me to the pawn shop and my parents write me a check for more than $500 to get the TV out, and then drive straight over to Bob's workplace and return the TV to the manager. As the manager finishes up the cancellation paperwork, my dad spots Bob pacing around the back of the parking lot, talking frantically on the phone. Unfortunately, I didn't get to hear the ensuing conversation, but my dad returns within a few minutes holding my house key and looking victorious. "I believe this is yours," he says as he hands me the key and then pulls me into a hug. And I cried a little into his shoulder. My dad gave me a squeeze, kissed my temple, and whispered into my ear, "They're firing him." I leaned back to look at my dad, and he just smirked and said, "Now he's jobless and homeless." I thought about it for a second before I said in my most sarcastic tone, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that." We laughed about it a little, and my parents gave me some words of wisdom before leaving me to drive myself home. My best friend was already waiting to keep me. Bob and his sister showed up a few days later for his pitiful boxes of stuff. He tried to talk to me, to explain, but my best friend descended on him like a harpy if he muttered more than a few syllables in my direction, so he was shut down almost immediately. He left that night, and I have never heard from him since. I blocked him on social media, but there was really no need as he made no effort to contact me on any level. That's Bob, ever lazy, ever deluded, and always a butthole. So here I am, many years later, happily married to my high school sweetheart and a mother of 2 beautiful little boys, and grateful to have moved on when I did. The experience with Bob certainly took its toll. I lost a lot of weight due to lack of appetite, but had a myriad of trust issues moving forward. But the point is, I moved forward. I have grown leaps and bounds as a person since this experience, and am truly content with where my life is now. But every now and then, when I'm drifting off to sleep, I can't help but wonder, whatever happened to good old Bob? Is he out there somewhere in the woods with a stick and his wits as his only gear, waiting for a Martian government to make its move? Ah well, a girl can dream. Man, Opie, I can't believe he wanted to use your sex toys on his mistress. That's super icky. Either way, I'm glad you kicked him out, and your parents seem like real awesome people. That was r/ProRevenge, and if you like this channel and want to support my content, please hit that like button because it really, truly helps me out. Welcome to r/ProRevenge, where OP gets a would-be pedophile arrested by the FBI. I found out today that my revenge was complete, so I came here to share it. My neighbor, who we shall call Christy, would report us to the HOA for literally everything she didn't like. Trash cans still on the street at 5 p.m. on trash day, reported. Kids bike outside while kids are still playing, reported. Didn't mow this weekend, typically I do this Monday nights, reported Monday morning. Dog barking at 2 in the afternoon as she and her dog walk on the path behind our house, reported. In many cases, these were not issues covered by the HOA, but due to repeated reporting, the board did fine us, and I had to go spend the evening waiting through a 2-hour meeting to have them removed. This kept happening and was driving me nuts. Both my wife and I spoke to her and tried to find out why she felt this was okay, and she told us, "You just need to do a better job of being a good neighbor." Fast forward to early this summer. She posts on a neighborhood website sharing a video about the anti-vax movement. In general, the replies are pretty aggressive about telling her she is full of it. But she keeps pushing back, leading to a super long post about how we're all wrong and we should listen because she's a doctor. She signs it, Dr. Christie last name, naturopathic physician. At this point, I am mostly just wondering what the heck any kind of doctor would be against vaccines. This made no sense to me, so I started digging. I did find that Christie was listed as a doctor on sites where you could find physicians. I dug more into what exactly a naturopathic physician was and found that in my state of Colorado, they are regulated and are required to maintain a license to practice. I checked into it and found out the following. 1. Christie was not in the state database as a naturopathic physician. 2. The board who regulates it has an online reporting tool. At this point, I took all the information I had, grabbed screenshots, and checked my timeline and reported her as claiming to be a naturopathic physician when she was not. I then followed that up with this post on the neighborhood website. This is a hot button topic for me, and because of that and Christy signing her post as Dr. Last Name, I had to dig some. I, for one, am a huge fan of including whole person treatment. I think doctors of osteopathic medicine are wonderful as they work to integrate whole health into the picture with well-researched medical best practices. Naturopathy less so, which is the problem here. One research article here breaks down a lot of the issues quite well. It's almost 13 years old, but still quite good at explaining the valid concerns. I further checked, as Colorado does regulate naturopathy, and I could not find any Christie last name listed there. My thought was that it is entirely possible that she holds a license to practice in Colorado, and my search wasn't working. But even just searching her first name or zip code or my town or town near us provides no results for Christie last name. At this point, Christie locked the post and later deleted the entire thing. I was pretty dang happy that she removed the post, but today it got better. In the mail, I received a copy of the cease and desist letter that Christy received from the state about a month ago. It told her that she must cease and desist her practice immediately. OP, obviously, you should report her to the HOA for running a business out of her home. Our next Reddit post is from Dwassafar. Back in the day, I worked as an independent IT consultant and was hired on along with another independent to subcontract on a team for a major consulting house. We'll call it consulting house. Everyone else on the team was a consulting house. The two of us were not supposed to tell the client that we weren't part of consulting house, but the client figured it out pretty fast because we independents were doing most of the work, while consulting house's code monkeys were busy filling out spreadsheets all day and going on team building exercises. But I digress. The project ran past its initial deadline and my contract expired. I stayed on a week-to-week basis as a professional courtesy to get the project finished, because I like the client, if not the team. Unfortunately, the consulting house project manager was booked somewhere else for his next gig, and they brought in a new guy to replace him. Let's call him David Stress. David flew in on a Monday morning to get the project handed off to him, and immediately started pissing on everything to mark his territory. He was derogatory and belittling to the team, and liked to raise his voice. I was working in my office, well, actually a closet that I shared with 3 other team members, and didn't hear what he was saying out in the main office, but I could sure hear his tone. Then he burst into the office and demanded, "How are we doing specific payroll-related conversion task?" I said, "We're using Program X." He waved his hand dismissively and scoffed, "That's stupid. Program X won't work for this. You need to do something else." The other Indie was in the room at the time, and she saw me coming up out of my chair. She told me later she thought I was going to deck him. I knew he was full of garbage because I wrote Program X. It was custom code for this project, and he had no way of knowing what it would or wouldn't do. He was just trying to bully me and be the alpha dog. I didn't deck him. Instead, I went to the client's payroll manager, with whom I'd been working closely for months, and who was driving the client side of the project. I laid it on the line. I said, "Look, I know you know I don't work for Closing House. I'm here on an independent contract. That contract is up, and I've been working here week to week just to get you guys through." She told me she was aware of this. Okay, this new guy, David Stress, is a bully and a blowhard, and I won't work with him. I have no contract at this point, and with him running the project, I won't be back next week. I'm not asking you to do anything specific about it. I'm just letting you know as a courtesy so you can plan to transition my work to someone else. She sat back in her chair, thought a moment, and said, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." 2 hours later, David Stress was removed from his new position. The payroll manager, faced with losing the one technical guy on the team who actually knew what was going on with a very complicated payroll system, called Closing House and said, "We don't want this new guy, take him away." Closing House rearranged some things to keep the original project manager with the project. The funniest part of the whole thing was that Consulting House had scheduled a welcome dinner for David at a posh steakhouse that evening. Rather than create further embarrassment of canceling the dinner, they actually went ahead with it as a farewell dinner for David, who had been on the project for less than 1 day. It was fun to watch him try to put on a brave face for that. OP, what I want to know is, did you tell this guy that you were the reason that you got him fired? Because, that would have been so tempting to do. Oh, by the way, jerkface, I wrote Program X, so I knew you were full of garbage. And I was the one who got you fired. See ya! Our next Reddit post is from Hi Internet Friend. I put a trampoline in my backyard in early 2017. I have 3 young boys, and we have enjoyed it immensely. My neighbor, the HOA president at the time, went to sell his house in spring of 2018, and his realtor said the trampoline in my backyard might be a detriment to getting top dollar for his home. So he convinced the neighbor on the other side of my house to complain as well. Out of the blue, I received a message from the HOA property manager that the neighbors complained and I would need to submit a form to get it approved. Intermission. What's sad is that I was friendly with both of these people. They had been in my home. They could have talked to me face to face. With one of the neighbors, I paid for our shared fence at her request, since her neighbor on her other side wouldn't contribute to their shared fence. Another board member and another piece of garbage. I would have been willing to dig a hole for the trampoline to hide it more, or purchase a new one with elastic bands rather than springs to make it quieter. Both of those options are cheaper than getting a lawyer, but nobody asked. Nobody came to me to have a face-to-face, heart-to-heart discussion about their concerns. A few ironies. These are 5-bedroom homes. Clearly, people with kids are going to move in, and they're going to be noisy in their backyard with or without play equipment. The guy who sold his home smoked like a chimney. I don't think my trampoline should have been his top concern. The guy who ended up buying his home are a great family with 2 kids who don't care about toys in other people's backyards. My neighbors have raised kids to adulthood, one of them 2 very active boys. When I pointed this out to her, the words that actually came out of her mouth were, "I know it's challenging to raise boys, but we're at different stages of our lives." As if that justified her trying to screw me. Back to the story. I filled out the form and sent it in. The Architectural Review Committee denied it a month later. I appealed the decision and met with the board in August. They sent me a letter and said it was in violation. I asked which rules it violated. They never sent me a letter, so I asked again a week ago. The property manager was adamant that she had sent the letter, but I asked for proof. She forwarded an email where she put my name in the to field after the fact. I had a strong suspicion it was after the fact due to the following reasons. An HOA meeting was mentioned that never took place. The responses to my questions varied in color, indicating they had been edited at different times. She responded immediately to my request for proof by indicating she would forward the email, but then took an hour, presumably editing a draft she never sent. She cited a rule early in the email, but then cited an additional rule later that superseded the first. The first cited rule could have simply been omitted. The message was not marked as forwarded message at the top, and the send time didn't include seconds. None of these things are a smoking gun, but they're suspicious. I asked the other people in the to field if they received a copy of the email with my name in the address field. The only honest member of the board replied he hadn't. The rest remained silent because they didn't want to look like they and the property manager dropped the ball. Intermission. If you're curious why the board didn't like my trampoline, here's the rationale provided in the letter that was never sent. Due to the close proximity of the homes to each other and the small yards, the trampoline is unsightly to the homes surrounding it. Realtors for those homes surrounding you have stated that it is a detraction to selling homes and is lowering the home values of those around it. There have also been neighbor complaints regarding the noise level, which makes those homeowners unable to enjoy their homes. They are also unable to use certain portions of their homes while the trampoline is being used. My kids all weigh under 35 pounds. They go to bed at 7 p.m. and don't jump on the trampoline in the morning before 10 a.m. My neighbors bought homes 10 feet away from mine. What did they expect? Back to the story. The year-end meeting was scheduled for yesterday, and 4 board positions were up for election. I got 3 of my friends on the street to run with me. I went door to door every day for a week and spoke with the majority of homeowners about their discontent with the street. I got a third of the community to sign proxy forms stating that I would vote on their behalf. I went to the meeting last night and put these fools on blast. I listed calmly all the ways the current board was failing the community and my plan to right their wrongs. My vote was a landslide in favor of myself and my friends getting elected. One awful board member remains, but he is the minority. We fired the property manager who was uncommunicative and flat out dishonest. The trampoline endures. The only bummer now is I have to manage a street which includes some legit crazy people. But this whole episode has convinced my wife that we will never live in an HOA again, which I count as a huge victory in addition to the trampoline remaining where it is today. OP, that story was looking a little dicey for a while, but I'm glad that you managed to bounce back. Our next Reddit post is from PME Shrek Boobs. After I broke up with my ex, I would keep tabs on him. Rumor, hearsay, friendly whispers, and public social media posts alike, due to the threat of violence. He'd occasionally post something about burning down my house, or he'd text a mutual friend and try to figure out where I'd moved to. So I felt justified, and we live in a very small town, so gossip flowed like honey. In reality, I was assuaging my anxiety by exerting what little control I could in that particular area in my life. Everything ended up documented for legal reasons to give it more legitimacy. At the time, friendly custody talks had broken down into we need attorneys to mediate. And due to the fact that I wouldn't release my daughter into his care without a custody agreement, I started to receive threats from both him and his family. Mostly along the lines of, if you're gone, the baby will be ours. One specific threat that still sticks with me was to burn down my apartment building, prompting me to move. My social worker / court-appointed attorney never received the requested documents for custody, so my concerns went from legal issues to my own physical safety rather quickly. After a while, it went from so-and-so is threatening you online to, did you hear that so-and-so got kicked out of where he was staying for trying to sleep with his roommate's 12-year-old cousin? And so-and-so isn't allowed near this person's 14-year-old daughter anymore because they caught him texting her nudes. I heard about 3 different young girls who had possibly been victimized by this dude, which was believable. He had pursued me when I was 19 and he was 26, and I look very young for my age. We broke up in part due to him being arrested for, quote, minor sexual crimes. All of these girls were coming from slightly trashy families with run-ins with the law, so he probably knew that the adults around would be wary of reporting him. So I reported him and all the online handles I knew he used to the mother effing FBI. Straight up went to the Center of Missing and Exploited Children on his butt. Not 2 months later, I get a message from someone saying, did you hear that so-and-so got arrested in a sting? He had been trying to sleep with this 12-year-old girl offline, and when he went to meet up with her, it ended up being a setup with the state police or something. He caught extra charges thanks to the whips and handcuffs he had in his backpack. Now he's in jail and a registered sex offender. If he had just not threatened me, I never would have paid attention to gossip concerning him, and he probably would have gotten away with his garbage for years. Hello, my name is Chris Hansen. Why don't you have a seat right there? That was r/pro revenge, and just a reminder, I have a merch store. You can find the link down in the description. Welcome to r/pro revenge, where Opie forces his stealing aunt to pay $400,000. This happened about 5 years ago. My grandma was getting old, late 80s, early 90s. She had one wish, to not die in a senior home. Easily done, as my grandpa sold some assets way back when, then invested the money and let it ride for 30 plus years. He never touched it and collected a pension. Way back when my grandpa died, about 10 years before this, my grandpa appointed my dad, my sucky aunt, and my uncle as the trustees of the trust. Basically, the trusted advisors for her and her care for the foreseeable future. All was well in the beginning. Then my dad, Willie, moved further away and couldn't take care of the day-to-day upkeep as the trustee and to see that my grandma was okay. My aunt, Rebecca, told her that she and my uncle, Fred, who lived in Arizona, could take over and all would be fine. It was fine for a while. A few times, my dad went back to visit and noticed my grandma didn't always have overnight care, or that her mail wasn't picked up and the driveway wasn't plowed. She also lost her cable TV and newspaper subscription. My dad figured it just lapsed, so he had the services put back on. My dad also noticed my grandma was eating moldy food at times because her truck was sold and she had no transportation. She drove up to 90 years old. She basically just chilled at the house alone and did crossword puzzles. The craziest part of this is that my aunt only lived 2 miles from my grandma, but my grandma told my dad she saw Aunt Rebecca once a week on Saturday for about 1 hour. As with the elderly in age, my grandma passed away. She did get her wish and was able to die in her home. Upon her death, things started to get real interesting. Once the probate lawyer got her children, my dad, aunt, uncle, and another estranged aunt, Becky, around the table, some shady business started to come out. My aunt Rebecca asked that everyone just forego any audit or paperwork and they just sell the house for around $400K and divide up the remaining bank account balance of roughly $400K. So just signing on the line, each sibling was to get a check for $200,000. Not too bad of an inheritance. My dad thought that was somewhat a little rush. He said at the time that he wanted to wait because my grandma's house was easily in the $600K range based on size and location. My aunt exploded in his face, cursing at him and calling him all kinds of names because he was unwilling to sign the assets then and there. She basically wanted a quick close while everyone looked the other way. My dad ended up leaving the room after the screaming and the deal wasn't signed that day. It took nearly 6 months before another appointment and they were all back at the table. The thing is though, when you're a trustee and the person dies, the funds and access to financial accounts are all under heavy scrutiny until the beneficiaries are made aware and sign the final papers. At the next meeting, my dad went in there with no intention to sign the deal. He got his brother, my Uncle Fred, to agree that they audit the entire accounts going back 5 years. When they demanded a subpoena at the meeting with a lawyer, my aunt ended up arguing that a forensic audit would cost $5,000 and it's a waste. Like, what difference does it make? 2 beneficiaries requested it, so it was what was going to happen. The audit report showed up about 3 months later. Here is where it gets good. My dad began looking over the audit report and saw that it was full of holes, like excessive monthly food costs for a 90-year-old lady, payments made for car services for a car my grandma no longer had, many different things in there that just didn't add up. My dad asked me to give the audit a second look, so I spent Saturday night going over it. And here is some crazy stuff I found and alerted my dad about. Costco monthly food costs $1,100 to $2,000 for the last 4 years. Telephone bills for 6 cell phones. Grandma has a home phone only. Gasoline for a truck my grandma didn't have for like 4 years and easily $400 a month. House repairs paid to my aunt's husband who owned a construction business. Some of the house repairs were like $16,000 for a new roof, new garage doors, home security system, which she didn't have, etc. All inflated prices. Grandma paid for my aunt to go to Europe twice on vacation. My grandma was paying my estranged Aunt Becky a stipend of $2,000 a month for the last 5 years, as well as her deadbeat son for $2,500. Every month they were paid. All grandkids were to be paid a lump sum of $10,000 upon their 30th birthday, as that is when the $50 check from grandma stopped for all the kids. Guess who was paid out? Her kids and my estranged aunt's kids. My grandma gave loans to my Aunt Rebecca for her husband's construction business in return for equity in the company, which amounted to nothing. These loans totaled over $200,000 over 3 years, right around when the housing bust happened. They also sold her assets like jewelry and whatnot for cash, because some big ticket items simply vanished from her house. Armed with all this, the next probate meeting was interesting. In the time between my grandma's death and the 3rd probate meeting, my aunt's construction business filed for bankruptcy. So that $200,000 in equity grandma had simply vanished. The probate lawyer was also somewhat concerned and makes it obvious that this was fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, where my aunt could actually get real prison time. After this, the negotiations were much more favorable. My aunt got nothing. Literally zero. My other aunt only received $25,000 after all the stipends. My father and uncle shared the rest after all grandkids received the $10,000 payout. The house sold to the first offer for $520,000. That was the regular revenge for any treacherous jerk that ripped off grandma and had her eating moldy food. Here is the pro. My aunt probably felt pretty bad that she couldn't supplement her lifestyle with grandma's money anymore, but that was the least of her worries. Since she tried to personally rip me off for $10,000, I took it personally. I don't care how tough you are. The IRS is the scariest thing that can happen to a person. Nobody wants to have their money forcibly removed. I did a little research and found the 3949-A. I also had the audit, and the legal office could and would provide the full trust if requested or demanded by the IRS. I don't know if it ever was. So I photocopied my documents, had them notarized, and sent off the info to the IRS. I felt like it went nowhere. Then, maybe 18 months later, I was notified and asked to come to the IRS building for an appointment in my city. The agent went over all the details, what they found in their research, and then they asked for a sworn statement. It turns out my aunt didn't declare something like $1.2 million in additional income over 5 years. And as such, she owed the IRS around $420,000 plus penalties. There was no way she was going to pay that on a teacher's pension. And after her husband bankrupted his business, her house was sold, her vehicle sold, and they left the state. Now, my aunt and uncle live in a depressing desert town like this in the Southwest. The IRS paid me around $60,000 about 3 months after the appointment. She should have paid that $10,000. So, OP is referring to a special policy with the IRS that most people don't know about. If you report someone for tax fraud and the IRS collects, they actually pay you a commission of, I think it's like 15%. Guys, do not mess with the IRS. Our next Reddit post is from Apple Fruit Spice. I was bullied relentlessly from the 3rd to 7th grade by multiple people in my class or upper grades. After I graduated 8th grade, I received a Facebook message from Andy, a boy who had been bullying and harassing me from the very beginning of it all. I would post the exact message, but it was extremely vulgar and long. He ended it by saying that since we would never see each other again, he could put it all out in the open about how much of an idiotic, ugly, and loser I was. Of course, he used a more colorful dictionary with those words, but you get the idea. However, there was one problem. My parents owned a large wood chipper. Andy's father owned a tree cutting business and would often rent it from them for much larger jobs. During the summer, I noticed him walk in and start talking to my uncle, and I realized the golden opportunity I had been given. I loaded Facebook on my laptop and bring the message up. I then approach his dad and tell him, "Your son sent this message to me a few days after graduating, and I think it's really important you read it." He raised an eyebrow at first, but took my laptop. As he read, I could visibly see his face turn blood red, and his hands shook as he gripped the sides of my laptop harder and harder. I think he reread the entire thing over again just to make sure what he was reading, and even clicked the profile to make sure it had indeed been his son who sent it. Finally, he gave me my computer back and told me he was so sorry for his son's behavior and language, and that he would most certainly be dealing with Andy the moment he got it. It took 2 months for me to hear back about the fallout. Andy's older and way nicer brother, Grant, was friends with my sister, who told her, and then she told me. Andy was grounded for the entire summer, fall, and winter break. His parents canceled the trip he was going to take to the beach with their student youth group at church, canceled his summer camp trip. They're going to hold him back from getting his driving permit for a full year, took away all his games and computer. Instead of going with his dad and brother on their hunting trips, he would be sent to his grandparents' house to help clean. His social media passwords were changed so he didn't have access to them. Delete his Xbox account, and Andy would have to work for his dad doing tree cutting the entire summer and winter holiday. There were more punishments, but I honestly could not recall them. I ruined his life for a good 2 to 3 years and destroyed the relationship he had with his father and mother. Probably not forever, but they certainly no longer saw him as their one child. It was so satisfying. satisfying. That's a pretty good revenge, don't get me wrong. But when you said that your dad owned a wood chipper, for a second I thought that you were gonna feed that kid into the wood chipper. I'm kinda glad you didn't. That would have been a little extreme. Our next Reddit post is from Apps or Coolio. I was working for an advertising agency, a pretty big one, and I had an unethical manager. Well, when I started out, I had a manager who was one of the most unethical managers I've ever dealt with. He'd order his sales reps to do things that would increase his bonuses, which are based on margins. For example, say a client decided to buy product XYZ and their spend was $2,000 a month. He would want the agent to put up products ABC and keep the spend at $2,000 even though the client didn't agree to that. The fact is, clients generally wouldn't notice, but if they did, it could cost you your job. I was the guy that refused his demands. He would tell me to check and I would refuse. He would get mad. I wouldn't care. This went on for quite a while. Now, there was something I don't tell people very often. I live in a one-party consent state, which means as long as I'm aware a conversation is being recorded, I can record it without informing the other party. I had just upsold my largest client, making him even larger. But I didn't sell the products my boss wanted me to sell. He demanded I switch things around. I refused. I told him I sold the client XYZ, that's what we agreed to. I'm not going to change without the customer's permission. His exact words were, F the customer. This is your largest client. I need him on ABC or I'm not going to make my number. I'm sorry, but you and I both know ABC isn't right for this client, and that's why he didn't buy it. You're fired. If you can't follow instructions, you're fired. After confirming he was dead serious, I said, if you do that, I'll have your job by the end of the month. I went home. I didn't think he'd go through with it. Sure as anything, next morning, I'm locked out of all of our systems. I call tech support and get told I've been fired. So who do I call? I call our regional vice president and tell him I have several recordings I think he should listen to. Remember, my boss ordering me to do unethical things wasn't uncommon. So I met up with the regional vice president and played 6 different recordings that I had saved showing my manager was pushing his agents to break the law. To which my regional vice president leaned back in his chair and let out a sigh knowing he had to fire my manager. Having a sales manager that is forcing his reps to break the law is just bad business. At which point, I asked for my job back. He agreed that I would get my job back and asked me to take the week off and call him on Monday. He told me he talked to payroll to make sure I got paid this week as well. For your information, he fulfilled all of his promises with me, although I missed a payday, but got back pay later, so I was fine with that. That Monday, I came into our Monday morning meeting in which Regional Vice President was there. He informed the entire team that my boss had been fired and why. He also mentioned that if anyone wanted to apply for his job, there was now an opening. So I applied for it, and after 3 rounds of interviews, got my promotion. Sure as anything, I was right. I did have my boss's job by the end of the month. It was glorious the first day walking into his office and sitting in his nice, big, comfy chair. My first order of business as the new boss would be to send an email to my old boss, thanking him for this thoughtful promotion. Our next Reddit post is from Deleted. So this happened a couple weeks ago, but I saw the result of it earlier today. A bit of backstory. I live in a predominantly I received quite a bit of criticism from my across the street neighbor because of the religious difference. I'm assuming we never interacted before he started messing with me. He currently has 10 children. About a month ago, on trash day, he told one of his kids to kick my trash can over into the street. The kid did it, and I witnessed everything. This is not the first time he's kicked my trash over, and I figured it was a lost cause to go over there and asked him for some decency more than I already had. That same day, I was reminded by a friend about how I used to have a pen pal when I was younger before I moved. Later that night, I was browsing the web looking for a pen pal when I stumbled across a cool sounding site, prisonpenpals.com. I visited the site and after clicking through a few dodgy links, was brought to an array of different prisoners who were looking for a pen pal. After doing a bit of browsing from there, I stumbled across a fellow who was on death row for first-degree murder. Feeling bad for this guy, but not wanting to give my address out, I sent an email. The guards print it out and give it to the prisoner, who then writes you a letter and delivers it to your physical address. I remembered the butthole across the street. More out of curiosity than malice, I proceeded to write a very detailed letter about how I am a trapped, secretly gay Mormon man with 10 kids who is looking to start an extramarital affair with a prisoner. I put in his address and send. I had my hilarious, petty satisfaction. I expected nothing to come of this. I thought he would be going through his mail, see the letter, not open it, toss it, and think nothing of it after that. But boy was I wrong. Of course, with it being a small town, this guy runs a small business here where one of my acquaintances works. I went in just earlier today and chatted with my acquaintance before he told me, "Oh my God, did you hear about Neighbor?" I said no because I hadn't, and he filled me in on all of the details. Apparently, one of the neighbor's kids had brought in the mail, only for his wife to find it and read the letter from this prisoner responding to the joke letter that I wrote. I don't know the specifics of the letter, but I do know that his wife threw a freaking fit when he arrived home and made him pack his bags. My acquaintance informed me that this was not the first time Neighbor had started or tried to start an affair with another man, and apparently this was the last straw for her. I'm still shocked, horrified, and extremely amused by this predicament. This post from the Zap Zuppins down in the comments. That poor first-degree murderer. He won't get a reply from his nice friend, the gay Mormon man. Frowny face. That was r/ProRevenge, and if you want to support my channel, check out my merch store. The link is down in the description. Welcome to r/ProRevenge, where a spoiled millionaire gets her life ruined. This all took place 5 years ago in the beginning. I've lived my whole life in Russia, except for the 4.5 years I lived in the eastern part of the United States, where I went to college for a degree in engineering after completing my 1 year of national service. There are lots of good schools here, but I originally had the intention of moving to America permanently. I have relatives who live in North America, so I was invited to stay with them during this time. It turned out I didn't really stay with any of them. Because I'm tall and good at sports, I also did high jump and basketball while in school. I was never that good, but adequate enough to make the team to such a degree that I was retroactively given a small athletic subsidy while already enrolled. It made my tuition slightly cheaper, which for an international student was a concern, even if my parents were high status regarding money. While enrolled in college, I met my soon-to-be girlfriend, Natalia, a girl originally from Connecticut and from a very wealthy family. Her major was fine arts, and we met in an English class and began dating. Natalia was a little more than 2 years ahead of me in her studies age-wise, but we became a serious enough couple to where I took an apartment outside of campus and she moved in with me. Her parents' house wasn't far from campus, but she chose to stay in my apartment mostly because I don't think she wanted to bring me to her house too often. Maybe her parents didn't approve of me, or maybe she didn't approve of me enough to show me to her parents very much. We had a good relationship, or at least I thought it was good. She never complained and always liked to show off that we're a couple. She was the first person I knew in my circles who owned a selfie stick, and she would take it with us, and everything was a photo opportunity. I didn't have any social media at the time, but I made one just so that she could tag me in her posts. Eventually, all her social media friends added me as a friend also. And since many people from my hometown had social media too, they saw me and added me as well. Among Natalie's friend group, people called me Drago, which is dumb because I don't think I look like Ivan Drago. Natalia makes no secret to me of the fact that she's from a wealthy family and tells me that she has a trust fund that will pay for her lifestyle her whole life, and she doesn't even really need to attend college. I'm from a privileged background too, but I don't have a trust fund myself. My father owns a small hotel outright, and where we come from, that means you're rich like Steve Jobs in a relative sense. So sometimes in the mail, Natalia would get these bank statements that just tell her how much money she has in her trust fund, how much interest it made, and what her dividend, or in other words, her allowance for the month is. It's for this reason that Natalia is in no particular hurry to finish school, which is why at the time she was already 23 but only barely a sophomore. Natalia would show these statements to me and leave them lying around the house. They didn't have her whole bank account number listed on them anyway. They just showed balances and the name of her bank. My parents and my athletics paid for a good amount of my expenses, but I still worked on campus at the bookstore to earn money. Natalia didn't work. I didn't really have many issues with Natalia. She seemed friendly enough, was pretty, and good company. We had lots of things to talk about, and we had fun together. Or at least, I had fun, and I thought she had fun too. I didn't know if I ever wanted to marry her, but I didn't rule out the idea. One thing I didn't like about her was the fact that she was very dramatic and very prone to panic. For example, if we were at a department store where she wants to buy a particular thing and her favorite personal shopper isn't available, she'll act like it's the end of the world. She wasn't above making scenes. She'd also be a bit short and rude with restaurant staff. One thing that I thought was a bit disingenuous of her was that although she was a millionaire, she liked to pretend to be poor. Not that there's anything wrong with not flashing your wealth, because there isn't. What I mean is that she'd try to act like she came up rough and that she was making life happen on her own, if I make sense. She tried to act like she was down for the cause, as some say. It's kind of like when rich suburban kids try too hard to copy how things happen in a hip-hop video. Except Natalia wasn't trying to be a white female Tupac. She tried to do this bohemian artist thing and pretend to some people that she was living on a shoestring. Around me, she was more herself. Or really, I don't know which self is her real self. All I know is that she isn't poor, but she pretends to be in certain company. Well, moving on. Eventually, Natalia tells me, "OP, what do you think about having an open relationship?" I didn't really know anything about open relationships, but when Natalia explained what they were, I told her I wasn't interested in anything like that. I asked her if she wanted to be in one, and is that why she's asking? But she said no, that she just read something about open relationships. From my now perspective, I know she probably had someone or some people in mind who she wanted to date or passionately hug with. Or she already had been doing these things with one or more people but just hadn't told me about it yet. Natalia has had her inner reproductive organs surgically cut so that she couldn't have children. I bring this up because she brought it up to me when she was practically begging me to have unprotected, passionate hugging with her, and I was worried about maybe getting her pregnant when she didn't want to be. She showed me the actual paperwork for the procedure by emailing me a PDF document that she received from her doctor. I only thought about it after the whole open relationship discussion because up until then, we had been having passionate hugging without a condom, and I assumed I was her only partner. And I knew for a fact I was clean, but now I was worried whether or not she was actually clean. But for a couple weeks more, things appeared to be going on as normal. She assured me over and over again that she had no other partners. And so, like a fool, I continued to have unprotected, passionate hugging with her. Suddenly though, within the month, Natalia tells me she needs to move out, that our relationship isn't working out. Okay, I think, I'm sad to see you go, but can we be friends? And her attitude is, yeah, of course we can be friends. Even then, I knew she probably met someone or had always been with that person and was now just ready to move on from me. My attitude is, well, most girls come and go. That's life. I'm sure many women have the same approach to guys. She left a lot of her stuff behind, like clothes and papers, including her bank statements that had her trust fund info on them. I tell her, since we're friends, why don't you come by and get your stuff? Or I'll bring it all to you. She said, "Oh, that's fine. I'll get them someday. Could you please hold them for me?" And it isn't as though she had many things at my apartment. I think she especially didn't want to have me bring the stuff to her house or her new place where she stayed because she had a new boyfriend. None of my business. I never linked my social media to my phone or went to computers to check it because I just didn't care about that sort of thing, and I still don't. But I found out later that Natalia had deleted and blocked me on social media almost immediately after she moved out, and combed through her friends and deleted anyone who appeared to be one of my friends from back home. I was almost done with my degree, and over the next year completely lost touch with Natalia, though I never argued with her or had an official falling out. I assumed we just moved on with our lives. I'd been accepted at another school one state away from my undergraduate college to complete a master's degree and didn't want to waste time. So I hired a service to box up some of the less important things at my house and forward them to my new apartment. By this time, I'd bought a used car, and so with one suitcase, I could set myself up for a few days while I waited for the bulk of my furniture and other luggage. I sent a text to Natalia and emailed her too, telling her where I was moving. Of course, I rerouted all of her mail to go to her parents' house not long after she moved out, because for a long time, she used my place as her address. She wasn't thinking big picture enough to do it herself. Otherwise, I could have kept getting her mail for a while. In my new hometown, I jumped head first right into studying, and hardly even went home, except to eat and sleep. I never even opened a few of my boxes that contained things I wouldn't need, like old textbooks or very heavy winter clothing. Those stayed in their moving boxes. So after another year, I had my master's and moved back to Russia. I'm happy because I'd managed to get a job right away in my chosen profession. I sell my car and most of my random furniture on the internet. I'd written down what's in each moving box on the outside of the box. The boxes that contained nothing I needed right away were kept sealed the entire time I was in my second American apartment. When I arrived in my current home, I finally opened all my boxes and realized that I still had some of Natalia's old clothes from when we were a couple, 2.5, 3 years ago. I even still had her old trust fund statements. I had over a year's worth of them, which is about the length of time Natalia lived with me. Since it had been such a long time and we hadn't talked in years, I assumed she no longer wanted the things. But I still didn't want to give them away or throw them away without seeing what she had to say. So, for the first time in years, I checked my social media, and I'm surprised to see that she blocked me from sending her messages. I tried to text her, but her numbers changed, or maybe she blocked me there too. Anyway, she doesn't reply. Same thing happens when I email her. Why would she block me, I wonder? I think it must be an internet problem. I log out and just try looking at her social media as a random web user and have no problem at all. I see that she hasn't really changed. Still pretty, still dressing up all quirky and bohemian. I feel kind of weird, but I take a little break from what I'm doing and just see what she's been up to for the last couple years. She's with some new guy now who looks a little bit like me but with longer hair and less responsible. Well, good for her. I can see that she really puts her whole life out there on social media. Every little thing is worth an update from her. She is as dramatic as ever. I do notice that she's a lot more political than she was before. Well, that's good. It's always nice to believe in something passionately. I'm not at all surprised to see that, as usual, she portrays herself as a struggling artist who's making a way for herself in the big bad city. Whatever works for you, Natalia, work it. She talks trash about high fashion brands. How she never had anything growing up. How she ate stew from grass as a child because she was so poor. She's really laying it on thick. And also, she ripped off that story from me because I was telling her how my relatives were forced to eat grass stew during the Patriotic War because there wasn't much other food. All of this is just her being a poser, which doesn't affect me. But what does affect me is when I see a post that mentioned me by name. Nat, that is so like your abusive ex, OP, OMG. Her friend was referring to a picture of how verbal abuse is just as damaging as physical abuse. Natalia had replied, "Yeah, OP really tried to destroy my self-esteem. He was also not shy about threatening me." Lots of guys who were her friends on social media commented that they'd kill me or kick my butt if they ever saw me. For most of them, I'd laugh because I would smash them like so many ants. Especially how most of them are like wearing women's blue jeans. I mean, really, are you sure about that, stick leg, sir? But right now, I am furious because Natalia lied about me. Some of them were even seriously talking about naming me to school administrators about having my degree canceled or having me put on some kind of offender list. None of them bothered to keep in contact with me, so they didn't know I moved back to Russia. But they were also talking about reporting me to the police or having me arrested. In other posts, Natalia also mentions me by name and actually accuses me of assaulting her in various ways. That I cheated through school, that my parents are in the Russian mob? Well, okay. In every post, Natalia tried to come off like she was taking the high road by not reporting me to authorities and that it was her cross to bear as a survivor. Her friends were like lemmings, giving her electronic backpats about how courageous she was. Barf. By a little digging, I saw that she broke up with a guy who I figured out was the man she moved on to after me, and he was getting slammed too. And I'll assume he was also blocked on social media. From piecing together what Natalia says to her friends on social media, it's clear she's built up an image of being a struggling artist, and her current boyfriend also appears to believe she's a struggling artist, and they share an apartment together. I piece it together that the boyfriend works a 9 to 5, but he looks like a hipster type, so maybe he's an artist too. He looks like he's struggling to keep it all together. They are totally into the activist scene. They're always talking about online funding for all kinds of charitable work. Noble stuff, not being sarcastic. Natalia smears me across platforms. The Book of Many Faces, the Grams that are instant, the stupid Blue Bird app where people unknowingly brag about how worthless their existences are. Right away, I think of the bank statements I have that show Natalia is anything but struggling. Because according to the statements I have, unless Natalia developed a $10,000 a day coke habit over the past 2 years and bought a Bentley and crashed it into Taylor Swift and lost a court case, she's getting just over 6 figures a year just sitting on her butt and will continue to earn these funds in perpetuity. But then I think I've moved on and I'm happy. I don't even know Natalia anymore. I don't really care what these social media losers think of me. Until I see yet another post where Natalia makes this dramatic statement about how she is unable to have babies as a result of a traumatic assault. To her credit, she didn't blame me for this imaginary attack, but she was also trying to score social points by pretending to be a victim. I was even more convinced when she and her friends actually altered some of the pics of me online that Natalia had once taken with her selfie stick and X'd out my face using Photoshop paint. The photos were captioned with all kinds of untrue slurs, really harsh criminal accusations. Funny how all of them are so eager to accuse me of being a criminal and are talking about how they'll kick my butt if they see me, but none of them think about telling the police about any supposed crimes I committed. Seems really lazy. She also blamed PTSD for the fact that she was near 30 and still not graduated from college. I thought about somehow faking an account and getting her to add me as a friend, but then while looking through her friends list, and she had like 1,000 friends, I saw that one of my friends was still on there. My friend doesn't speak any English and he doesn't spend much time on social media either, so he had no idea what any of these people were even saying. I noticed even long ago that it was weird that Natalia didn't include her own parents on her friends list, but she explained that away by saying that they were too old and didn't do technology. Maybe, Natalia, but chill. Your parents are like 52. I suspect now, even then I suspected it. It's because she wanted to build up a different persona online, and her rich parents would ruin that image. Through lots of digging, I figure out where Natalia works. It's a nonprofit. I finally decide to return Natalia's things. I put her old clothes, many of them really expensive designer shoes and purses, into a box with her bank statements and address them to her nonprofit. I don't actually write Natalia's name on the outside. I write her name on the inside, explaining in a note that these items are all the things that she bought while she lived with me when I was still in the USA. I figure they could raise many thousands of dollars if they sell those things on eBay. I mean, if Natalia, the owner, was willing to part with them, of course. It would be great for their nonprofit. Could you ask her about it? A couple of days later. As for Natalia's actual bank statements, before mailing them in the box, I collected some of her greatest hits online, where she posted pictures of herself at rallies bemoaning the 1%, complaining about her hard knock life, about how much she cared for others suffering. And I combined these photos on a photo editor with scans of her bank statements, with red highlighter around her monthly balance, how much she had in total, and how the funds would last forever. I also made sure to highlight the name of the originator of the trust, a quite well-known name in American industry who is identified as her great-grandfather. For each of the 12 statements, I add one of Natalia's hypocritical posts about being poor, struggling, living check to check, how she depends on her art to survive. My favorite salvo is where I screen cap her post about how she's unable to have children due to an attack. I merged this with my PDF she sent me where she paid over $10,000 to have her tubes tied. I made sure to highlight our parents' state and zip code on the invoice, though I crossed off their exact address. I made my point though that the procedure, which took place a few years ago, was when she still lived with her parents in one of the most titanically expensive locations on planet Earth. My Russian friend and I spent the next fun hours spamming the walls of all of Natalia's friends with these pictures that show she is rich and a liar. All of them we had access to anyway, and it was well over 300. We make sure to fire similar battleship broadsides to her overfiltered and photoshopped account where she's always thinking she has to lie to kick it. And also send her and all her friends lots of bird calls on that other app. The fallout was hilarious. The denials, sad and pathetic, but mostly hilarious too. Credibility? Oh, that credibility. Oh, Natalia, it's destroyed. Why is your boyfriend so mad at you? Did all the organizations you've liked on social media like it when they saw you were sitting on a fortune and yet claiming, I don't have any money, starving artist lol, but I can offer my time or homemade brownies, tee-hee. Day 1, 1,200 friends, 2,700 subscribers, 1,000 followers. A week later, 600 friends, 900 subscribers, 400 followers. Natalia, are you sure you're not James Charles? My friend doesn't speak English, but he and I are waiting to see if he'll be the last one eventually. And anyway, social castration and death needs no translation. Months after that, I was curious to see later if she was online anymore. Poof! Her profiles were gone, or at least the ones she'd been using for years. I hope her boyfriend enjoyed his sudden come up. It was probably an amazing day at the office for him to come home and learn that his bohemian hipster girlfriend was sitting on millions of dollars. To this day, I have no real idea why Natalia would do this to me to begin with. I was always nice to her and never even raised my voice to her. I can't even remember one occasion where we actually argued. It's a mystery. What isn't a mystery is the fact that the nonprofit actually called me long distance to thank me for the box. And they made sure Natalia got it. I didn't try to make any secret that these items came from me. So if Natalia wants to sue me for finishing a war she started, she can go right ahead. She will drown in her bunker beneath her lies, and I will be breakdancing and crip walking, planting my flag on her Reichstag. Anyway, they said Natalia tried to deny the things were hers at first. But later, when she saw the bank statements, she tried to say I bought those things and was trying to smear her. Yeah, okay. I bought a bunch of 9,000 euro purses and mailed them to strangers on the off chance it might embarrass you. Eventually, she took the papers, making some stupid claim that they were forgeries, but left the big ticket items pretending they weren't hers. For what it's worth, the people at the nonprofit knew the statements were legit and told me so. The girl who called me from the nonprofit was asking me if she and the other girls could have the items. I reminded her that the items were Natalia's, but if she abandoned them, then I say go to town. I asked if Natalia still worked there and if I could talk to her. Oh no, sorry, they tell me. Natalia moved back home with her parents. Must be nice having such a luxurious 8-bedroom fallback trench. Live by the sword, Natalia. Enjoy getting impaled on it. I hope you enjoyed finally getting your stuff back. From Russia, with love. This revenge story is colder than a Russian winter. What I love is that OP brought down a freaking millionaire from the other side of the world. I mean, this Natalia was literally someone with FU money. But Natalia, in Soviet Russia, FU money F's you. That was r/pro revenge, and this is r/puppy bloopers. She'd also be a bit short and rude with restaurant staff. Dog. She'd also be a bit short and rude with restaurant. She'd also be a bit short and rude with restaurant. Or she already had been doing these things with Natalia has had her inner reproductive organs surgically cut. I was almost done with my degree. Since it had been such a long I can see that she really puts her dog. What do you want, Pooch? I'm gonna play butts. Dog. Natalia had replied, welcome to r/pro revenge, where a nice old grandpa gets revenge against his entitled kids from beyond the grave. Our first post is from Hichtel. This story is the story of the grandfather of a good friend of mine, and how he dealt with his inheritance in a very unique way. He had 2 sons, and each of them also had 2 sons. In the last year of his life, my friend and I visited him every morning and every evening. You see, he didn't want to go into a retirement home, and apart from getting ready in the morning and in the evening, he did not really need help. Now, I need to explain something real quick. Back in the day, we still have mandatory service in the Army for 12 months, but there was several ways around it. I will only explain the most common ways since it is connected to our story. You see, instead of going to the Army, you could say you refused to go to the Army for ethical reasons, which was really just a formality. You simply wrote a 1-page essay about why you think you being in the Army would violate your personal ethics, and they pretty much had to accept it. But that meant you had to go into civil service. Civil service could be any kind of job that, in a wider sense, is a service to society. So these jobs range from kindergarten to retirement homes and anything in between, like hospitals, homes for the physically or mentally disabled, Meals on Wheels, pretty much anything you can imagine. You would be paid for that time the same amount of money you would get in the Army, and had the right to certain perks like a free room, health insurance, work clothes, etc. The same stuff any soldier gets. Plus, since soldiers get free food, you either got free food or a food allowance. I did my time in a retirement home, and it was an awesome experience. I think a job like that really widens your horizons as a young, arrogant turd, and really matures you and shows you what is actually important in life. Back to the story. I was just done with my time in the retirement home, and for 1 year simply wanted to work around and make some money. Then, one of my best friends comes to me and tells me he needs my help. His grandpa can no longer do everything by himself, but really only needs help in the morning to get ready and in the evening. Since I have learned how to do this from real professionals, he asked me to show him, so his grandpa does not yet have to go into a retirement home. He later admitted Grandpa said he would rather kill himself than get into a nursing home, and he seemed really serious about it. He didn't tell me at the time, since he didn't want to pressure me into helping him like that, which I really appreciated. He was one of my best friends, and I really liked his grandpa. When I was younger, I didn't have a grandpa, but we visited him all the time, and I became his unofficial 5th grandson. So, of course, I said yes. The original plan was to show him for 2 to 3 weeks, and then observe him for another 2 to 3 weeks. Then he would do it on his own. But we ended up doing it together for over half a year. Then Grandpa had a stroke and died within 2 days in the hospital. 2 days later, my friend asked me to come with him to the lawyer where the last will would be read. His grandfather had specifically asked that his will should be read the day before he gets buried, which is quite unusual, but not illegal as such. I asked why he wanted me there, and he told me the lawyer had officially invited me, since Grandpa had left me something as a thank you for my service. I was a bit embarrassed, but also happy that Grandpa had thought so highly of my service. He even put me in his last will. Now, my friend's dad is an entitled butthole, and the same goes for his uncle. We arrived there and went to the room. The entitled dad said to me, "Why the hell are you here? I know that Dad called you in jest his 5th grandkid, but this is for real family." Entitled uncle said, "I bet the little gold digger hoped he would get some money in the will." I was asked to be here by the lawyer. Take it up with him. I have no idea why I'm here. "If you pull something to get his money, I will sue you so hard, even your kids will still need lawyers." My friend said, "Show some respect and stop shouting. I know you two did not really give a flip about your dad, but show at least a minimum of respect." "How dare you talk like that to your elders, you little turd." "You two get exactly as much respect from me as you showed your own father. None." He really shouted the last word, and it finally shut the two up. We sat down and still had to wait for the other 2 grandkids to arrive. The 2 sat right behind us, and what they talked about really made my blood boil. Apparently, they had gotten new cars, new jewelry for their wives, and had planned a huge holiday. All that was paid for by credit, and they had planned to pay for it with the inheritance. None of them said even a word about missing him. Being sad that he died? Nothing. Only me, and money, money, money. They seemed to be in competition as to who could spend the inheritance faster the way they planned away the money. Then, finally, we were all there and the lawyer read out a short letter. What I'll tell you here is a much shortened version, but the real thing was several pages. But it boils down to this. "In recent years, I more and more realized that some people in my family cared a lot more about me than others. I am especially disappointed in my 2 sons, but I wanted to be really fair and not biased, so I came up with a point system. Each letter or phone call was 1 point, plus 1 extra if it is very long. Each visit was worth 2 points per hour, plus 1 point per hour of travel to me and back. Helping me out with something was 3 points per hour. This is the final result over the last 3 years of my life. Entitled Dad, 8 points. Entitled Uncle, 10 points. Entitled Uncle's first kid, 150 points. Entitled Uncle's second kid, 133 points. My friend's brother, 288 points. My friend, 7,341 points. Me, 5,883 points. My lawyer has already liquidated most of my assets except the house. Once it is sold, the money will be divided by the points so we know what each point is worth. And then every person gets a share of the money according to his points. For about a minute, you could hear a pin drop. Then, both Entitled Dad and Entitled Uncle started shouting at the same time that they knew we would have pulled something and this will would never stand. Of course, they tried to sue Entitled Uncle, his kids, and Entitled Dad together, but they lost. And there was a secret clause. Not really secret, it was simply not read to us that day, so nobody realized it was there since we all assumed everything was read to us on that day by the lawyer. The will said that if somebody sues against the will, he loses his share of the inheritance. It took nearly 3 years until all the lawsuits were over. I was blown away when we finally got the money. I am not naming a sum, but it was way more than I felt comfortable accepting. So I wanted to give at least some of it to the other 3 grandkids. But my friend finally convinced me to accept it by saying to me, "You cared for him when he needed you without expecting anything for it, which makes you 10 times more his family than any of those efforts. They got what they deserved." Oh my God, that was delicious to read. That grandpa, he's laughing from his grave, man. This point system is brilliant. It's an objective measurement of how stuck up and entitled these people actually are. I am so glad that OP and his friend got the inheritance that they actually deserved. Our next post is from Want to Avoid Drama. 2 years ago, a new family moved into our quiet little neighborhood and began their reign of terror. We lived here for over 20 years in this neighborhood, and except for these past 2 years, it's been wonderful. I love our neighbors, except this family. This family sucks. I'm not even sure where to begin. They are loud, they are dirty, they are obnoxious, their dogs bark at all hours. They constantly yell at each other, and they throw parties well into the night. They steal my older neighbor's paper. They actually trained their Rottweiler to fetch their neighbor's paper. Impressive, but wrong. They throw their dog's poo into other yards. Ugh, so much. They even cut my 80-something-year-old neighbor's prized roses for themselves. Who does that? There are about 100 issues I could write about and how we've all dealt with them, but this past weekend was my own glorious take on it all. Oh, and yes, we tried talking to them. We tried inviting them over. We've done nice things for them, and all we've expected is that they act like decent neighbors. That's never happened. In our neighborhood, parking is scarce. Most of these homes are classic 1950s with single-lane driveways, and parking is limited even on the streets. There's a busy road a few blocks away that has a great nightlife and popular restaurants, which means that at times, especially on weekends, the street can fill up. This family has 4 drivers and 5 vehicles, with only enough space for 2 in their driveway at a time. Constantly, they would park and leave their vehicles for days and sometimes weeks in front of others' homes. Sometimes leaving their driveway empty for no reason, with all their cars parked on the road. I kind of believe that, in itself, isn't that big of a deal, except for how and when they would do it. They were intentional about it and would try to do it to cause the most grief with everyone. And this went on for months, a complete FU to everyone. After months of this, and no one retaliating or giving them the satisfaction of how pissed we all are, they started parking deliberately in ways to make it difficult to get out of our driveways. I had to have my husband come out most mornings to guide me so I wouldn't hit their car as I backed out of my own driveway. There were also times where they squeezed my neighbor's car on the street to where they couldn't get out. Finally, an older retired neighbor goes down to the city police station and inquires about what to do. They found a code or law stating that so much space from the sides of driveways and yada 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 is required. So we come home one night to freshly painted yellow curbs outlining every house surrounding this one. A few weeks ago, my husband's car breaks down and he has to get towed. On his way back, he starts talking with the tow truck driver about these butthole neighbors and their cars. He tells my husband that if these cars are parking illegally, we should call the non-emergency line, and if they receive a ticket, to call him and he can tow them at the owner's expense. It's the law. My husband and him keep talking and even meet up for a beer a few nights later. They are big fans of the Blazers. Rip City, he's a real good guy. About a month ago, we met a couple in our fair city, and it just so happens that the husband is an officer. We were already planning on meeting that Friday night, and when we met, I brought up the butthole neighbors and their parking. He says that he'll drive through on his shift, and if he gets time and if he sees them parked in the yellow, he has no problem ticketing them. Great. He also gets some of his friends to check it out when they have time too. Fantastic. We've been calling almost daily at this point about their cars parked illegally, but nothing was happening. That Saturday night, he sends me a text saying he ticketed 3 cars. I missed the text, so no tow truck, but I kind of figured with the 3 tickets they'd get the idea. They didn't. Off and on all week, it was the same. This past Saturday, the teenage son throws a party and everyone, I mean every single one of their guests and them parked in the yellow of someone's driveway or blocked someone out altogether. Obviously, the little jerk told all of his friends to block our driveways or block our cars in. I sent a text to our officer friend who told me to call the non-emergency line and he'd be the one to look into it. But I'm scheming bigger. I call up the tow truck driver and tell him that there are at least 15 cars parked illegally, and all are about to receive parking tickets for blocking driveways and cars. I let him know we are friends with an officer, and he and I scheme a little further. We get a solid plan. I call our officer friend back and tell him our plan, and I also mention that the party is likely going to be filled with underage drinkers. Now, I hate busting parties, but I make exceptions for little turds and especially little underage drinking and driving turds. He and I finalized the plan. Here's how it all went down. Officer and 3 of his partners